being a Commodore is a world of difference. It's like being a mini admiral. You start to get some authorities that you have as a flag officer. You're out there and you're writing like the organization that's going to execute the missions out there.
Yeah.
You're sending people in and out of countries and you don't have to check with anyone else. Like you're bottom lining the thing.
Yeah.
Like it is more authority than you'll ever have in your life. That by far was the absolute best thing I ever got to do.
This episode's sponsors are the Navy Special Operations Foundation is the only foundation that exists to exclusively serve the men and women and the families of the Navy Special Operations community. NSOF exists to ensure that our operators and their families are provided with all the tools necessary to overcome any challenges they face and to ensure that they are never alone in the fight. To learn more about the organization, request support, or make donations, please visit nsof.org. Welcome to the Echo Oscar Delta podcast, where we talk to Navy EOD techs and hear the stories that they want to share. All ideas, thoughts, and statements are those of the guest and the host of Echo Oscar Delta, and not of Navy EOD or Navy as a whole. Today we have Lenny Lyon. He did 27 years before he retired as a captain in EOD, did 6 deployments to Japan, Korea, Bahrain, did some ship time on the USS Enterprise, the Eisenhower, and the Truman. Appreciate you coming and sitting down.
Oh, happy to be here.
Yeah. So, tried and true. How'd you find EOD?
So interesting story. I was at college and I went on a summer cruise and I didn't have a lot of money back then. So I had to make most of my money for the rest of the year. So I would always take the first summer cruise that I could get on, and ended up I went to Newport, the ship picked us up, went down to Charleston, and then they went on like a 60-day stand down or something like that after their deployment. And so I had literally nothing to do.
Yeah.
So I was sitting around working out with another guy, Rich McDaniel, was just a wonderful dude, and trying to get qualified, do things. And the weapons officer, God rest his soul, he's actually Robert Dolan. He passed in the Pentagon on 9/11. Mm-hmm. He said, "Hey, do you guys want to go see the EOD unit?" So we're there in Charleston, and I was like, "Sure." And so, we were kind of laughing, me and Rich, going, "All right, yeah, we can go." We didn't know what it was, and we went in, and looking around, I was like, "Okay, this is kind of neat." And they said, "Oh, Senior Chief, I can't remember his name, is going to come in and brief you." Well, we'd been on the ship, so we're thinking. We look at each other and go, how big's this guy's going to be? The guy's resting their coffee cup on there. And this guy walked into the space, and he had to turn sideways to fit his shoulders to the door. And me and Rich were both like, I just looked, I'm like, oh man, this is where I want to be. And they just got back from the Gulf War, and they started to talk about like the real stuff they did and the mines and things like that. And I was just smitten. I was like, oh my God, these are the guys that I want to be. I mean, if I could be so lucky as to be part of this crew. So I went back and I had all the names of everybody, and I wrote it down on my service selection, and very fortunate I got it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How was the process once you decided that's what you wanted to do? How was the process?
It was good. I mean, are you asking me as far as like once I got selected and got into the pipeline, or like? Yeah,
or even just like from the time that you request, like put your package up to be selected, and then getting actually selected and going.
So I mean, back then it was you put everything in, and everything was paper. I didn't hear anything, and then all of a sudden one day in naval science class, the old projectors guy, one of the instructors said, "Hey, service selection's in," and he had a piece of paper that the see-through paper.
Yeah.
Put it on there, and he was a jerk. and we're all like looking, and it was by designator. Okay. So they laid it down. I'm like 1190. What's that? I'm like, I think I'm looking. I'm like, it's the only one. It must be EOD. So I was like, oh, I made it. So I was really excited. But right when I graduated in '92, at that point they were taking the whole military and saying, hey, we don't need as many, the peace dividend, right? We had defeated the Russians and the whole thing. So they said, half of everybody can just get out in the Army, the Air Force. And so they said, hey, well, anybody that wants to take up to a year off, go ahead, because we're backlogged. Okay. Like we have guys waiting a year and a half just to get into flight school. So anybody that wants to take it. So I took a year off, worked on my master's of physics.
That's awesome.
And of course, didn't get it. Another story, but I went through this process and then waited about a year and then went out and started back then the pipeline that they switched. But I went to SWAS first. And then after I get SWAS, I went to dive school so that I could forget everything I learned at SWAS.
Right.
And after dive school, I went to the ship so I could learn everything that I learned at dive school. And then after that, I went to EOD school and then on to my first unit. So it was very disjointed back then.
Yeah.
We were kind of just sort of becoming a community. I mean, we'd had it. We were building. It was 04 COs turning into 05 COs and sort of more what we see today. But yeah, it wasn't a lot of information on it.
Yeah.
And you just sort of went through and urban legend and stuff like that. And when you got to your first unit, then you kind of saw what it was like.
As you were going through school, did you have, like, from your interactions at the EOD Det in Charleston, did you have an idea of what all EOD could do, or just like that little piece that was like, okay, I'd rather do that than whatever else there was?
Yeah, the only thing they talked about and the only thing I knew was these guys were, in the war and went after mines and dove. And I loved being in the water. And I just thought, wow, this is fantastic. Because it wasn't that sort of in your face, look at me, I'm so great. It was the quiet professional that we talk about all the time, where it was, this is what we did. We went here, we took this, I ran across this problem. We approached it in this way. And you're just like, this guy is like a genius. Like this isn't just like some knuckle dragger that came out here and can swim really well. Like this guy is absolutely thinking 3 steps ahead of what you need to do and just eloquent, talked about it. And so I'm like, man, that's it. I didn't know anything about like the IEDs and the, chemical and biological. Like you hear about it, you read it, but I mean, there's no internet.
Right.
So you actually had like somebody had a book like, oh, neat. Let me see that. Oh, is that what it's all about? And so you read it, but you really had no idea other than this is better than being on a ship, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That part still holds true.
Yeah.
You got to your first mobile unit. Actually, as you went through school, did people start, instructors and whatnot, start talking a little bit more about what you got yourself into?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, every one of them would tell you just great stories of camaraderie along with a mission they did. Yeah. So it was all about the brotherhood of just, you are going to put your life in this guy's hands and you're going to go out and do wonderful stuff. And if you're fortunate enough, you'll get to do something real, right? Because the war had ended, right. Nothing else had started yet. But it was, they would just tell these stories that I remember so clearly about these guys they'd served with that they just absolutely loved being around. They hated, they fought, but they loved being around. And the mission was kind of a bonus on top of that.
Yeah. That actually, potentially this question should come way later, but it's coming up now.
It's your podcast.
It's kind of in that, we're kind of in that phase again where the war has ended. You hear the stories of it, but the new guys coming in, they came in because of the stories a lot of times, right? But then they get here and they're like, wait a minute, now there's not really much going on. What was the feeling like coming in, hearing those stories, and then being told like it'll happen at some point? What was the feeling like?
So I mean, interesting back then. So when you had to go to the fleet first, you were just so happy to be in EOD that there was nothing really they could do at that point to make you. And I don't begrudge this generation whatsoever. Like I was one of the last guys that didn't get a bonus. Guys after me got tons of bonuses. I'm so glad they did. I don't look at them and go, oh, I lost on them. I don't think that for a second. Yeah. So I think the issue is more so as we've come directly off the street. There's a significantly higher expectation from those guys, right? They come in, they're sort of seen as fantastic. They don't have to go through sort of this fleet time to acclimate into the fleet to understand how bad it can be, right? So this is just sort of bad, right? As they go in, like if there's nothing there. For me, I was able to. The way I approached, let me put it this way. I just said, hey, I had a lot of deployments at the beginning, and then I asked for other ones, and they're just like, no, we need you on fleet staffs. Maybe that was indicative of my competence, right? But it was, I'll take another deployment. I'll take another operation. Wherever you want to send me, I'll go with the chance of maybe getting to do something. Yeah. But that was because I wasn't really going to leave. Like this was the thing, and I didn't need to get something else. Whereas I think the guys today, they probably want, they have a higher expectation level. Like on everything, like I got a pair of Gore-Tex pants that had 3 guys' names in it before I got it.
Right.
And I was like, I'm so happy to have Gore-Tex, and the zippers were broken. And today they get personalized gear and everything like that.
Yeah.
And that's great. They should get that. Like, don't think for one second that I'm being the old guy that's crotchety. Like, they should. And so we have to figure out a way to continue to sort of appeal to that and to tell them. And I think a lot of that is just through challenge, right? We got in this community because we wanted a challenge.
Right.
So I think as leaders, we need to be better about writing guidance and throwing problems in front of these guys and saying, here's a problem for you to solve. Because that they'll latch onto, right? The ability to lead or the ability to solve a problem are the 2 greatest things that you can do for somebody in the absence of combat and real time. If it's just more TPS reports and more training that's not really that great, it's not going to hold their interest, and they're going to leave, and everyone will get mad and go, oh, these guys are this generation, blah, blah, blah. No, it's incumbent upon you as a leader to lead your people. Yeah, right? I mean, so if they're getting out, it's your fault.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's like, oh, that's it. That's what you sign up for. And I'm not saying it's fair. Right. But there's a lot of guys that got relieved from the ship when they weren't even awake. Because something happened, but it's their ship. That's it. Right. That's the Navy. Yep. Yeah. So it's a challenge back to everybody that's in a leadership position right now, that if you're not holding the interest of the people that work for you, that's your problem. Yeah. And you need to fix that. Right. And is it easy? I don't know if it's easy to be done already. Right?
Yeah, right. That's true.
Yeah.
No, that actually makes perfect sense, because we just recently went out and did something that was absolutely miserable. Like, just the conditions where it was so hot. We had enough water, but by the time you're drinking the last of the water, it's the temperature of outside. Yeah. And, just the timeline to go do it all. It was just for an exercise, but ended up doing live demo in a weird way underwater. It went off, and as miserable as it was, I was expecting that all the dudes were going to be like, we never want to do that again. We hate you for putting us in this situation, And as it turns out, they were like, man, that was awesome. We felt like EOD techs. Right. I think you're 100% right that people just want to be challenged and do a portion of the EOD job. Yeah. That's a good point.
One of the things that I would do all the time when I was the CEO of the training unit is I'd walk around and I would talk to my direct reports, and I'd say, what are you working on? And, they would say, oh, I have this thing from the group that we have to fill out. That I go, I don't want you to spend more than 3 minutes doing that. Like, well, but sir, you had like big shoulders. Like it's on me. If anybody comes back and says that you didn't do the right thing, send them my way. I go, but that's not going to make you want to do your job, and it's not going to make the training unit training better by you spending time on that. I go, so take risk. Yeah. Take risk there. Do as little as you possibly can to answer the question, send it in, and just tell the person, if you need something else, happy to help you. Don't be a jerk, just say that, but get it off your plate and go back to why you're here. Right. To make the training more challenging, to make the training better. And because when you're doing that, you're energized, you're excited, you're like, hey, how do we do? And that philosophy turned into, changing was it the OP5 on being able to use water bottles in the training area. Yeah. You only should be in the demo range. And they came into my office, right? And so I guess can I get written up after the fact? I don't know. But so we go out and we're right in the middle of training everybody for the war. And I go out and to watch, and I'm like, oh, okay, they're doing a water bottle charge. And we're not on the demo range, but we're out in the woods. And I'm like, that doesn't seem right, but I don't know, maybe, I just got here. And so I asked, hey, he's with, they're like, well, sir, and I won't say any names, right? But I go, you're not really allowed to do that, are you? Like, we'll stop doing it right now. I said, no. Answer me a question, senior. I said, if you stop doing that, what's the impact to training? They said, well, by doing that, we give every team leader at least 3 live drills, and we just don't have the time and the resources on the demo range and make it realistic to do that. I said, okay, go ahead and keep doing that. I want you to write me an SOP that will never show anybody, right? And you'll follow that. And he got up to late. I'm like, whoa, we're not done. Now comes the bad part. And we're going to go ahead and change the policy for DOD. And they just looked at me. I'm like, I'm going to call Department of Defense Explosive Safety Board. I'm going to get some GS-15s down here, and we are going to do testing on the range with water bottles next to stuff and we're going to measure everything or like anything they want. And Jehu Humphreys was the guy that did it. And he did every single part of that. And it got to the point where they're like, we got everything we need. We can change. And now you can do this once the thing is fenced in.
Nice.
And so it was like, yeah, totally doing something wrong, but a challenge.
Yeah.
Right. You challenged it and the whole unit responded. They did it. And now everybody benefits from that thing that Jehu Humphreys put together back in 2011 and walked Department of Defense Explosive Safety Board. Now everybody can use that of a benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, I know just from personal experience going through training, especially as a new guy, that getting to work with live explosives in the training realm, the more you can do that, one, the more comfortable you are, but two, like the ability to actually see what it does and not get to that point where, you know, the instructor does the best they can. They rip up the IED and they throw everything everywhere. And then you go down, you're like, that wouldn't happen. Like, oh no, it did. Cause your tool did exactly that. Yeah. Or what generally happened when I was a junior guy and I set stuff up is it just punted the thing across and then I had to still go. Yeah. Whatever. We won't talk about that. Yeah. So getting, as a junior officer, getting to your mobile units and starting to work, was that kind of what you, well, actually by the time you got there, you were probably a lieutenant, right?
Yeah.
So you were a
5 years in.
Yeah.
That's my first mobile unit.
Yeah. So that's a little different. Cause my first OIC was like one of the last ones to go through that as well. So he was, you know, a lieutenant and had been doing some things for a little while, had a little bit of kind of fleet experience. Right. And then in the realm, how was it going from, you know, having been doing the Navy thing for a little while, then even if it was back and forth between the training lanes and whatnot, or schoolhouses and whatnot, to actually now you're in charge of a team and going forth?
Yeah, it was neat because I came from a minesweeper. So, I memean, I understood a lot about mine warfare. So that was like super helpful. And then I knew like the fleet stuff incredibly well. I filled in as the XO as do a lot of the guys back from my day. So, I mean, like you had all kinds of guys that you had to lead. You knew how to do division officer, no book, like 3M. I knew how to do boards, like all that kind of stuff. So I was super helpful. Like, you know, when I came into the dev, they were like, this is great. Yeah. You don't know anything about EOD, but man, you know about all this other stuff. And so, you know, my senior chief's like giving me stuff like, hey, do this, sir, do this. And then on top of that, I was the first class to get ADOPS.
Oh, really?
So it was microfiche, the class before me, or like a couple classes before me. Yeah. So I showed up and like, none of these guys know how to use ADOPS. So like, I was just so fortunate because I brought like this, I know how to do everything in the fleet and I know how to do ADOPS. So like, you're great. And if you ask any of those guys now, they're probably like, that guy was an ass. Like, you know, but at least I added value, right?
Right.
So, but I went in there and I felt I probably much more prepared than the guys do today. Yeah. And I'm not advocating you spending 5 years in the fleet to do something like that. But there's a happy medium. And I think we're trying to get there with sort of the leadership training and like teaching guys stuff, but we probably don't do a good enough job. And if you ask somebody, you know, when no one was looking and they'd admit like, yeah, I really wish I knew how to do 3M better because I don't have any idea like what they're talking about with the boards. And I just let senior chief do that. Yeah, we should be probably training our guys and gals a little bit better on that, even though nobody wants to do that. Yeah. But if you understand the fleet, then you know when you don't, it's just like an RSP. You know when you don't have to do something. Yep, exactly. As opposed to just like, oh, this is dumb. It's understanding it and being able to explain it as opposed to being part of the problem, right? Because otherwise it just seems like another TPS report. Right. Yeah. And then if you have a little bit of a bad attitude, the guys are going to have a little bit of a bad attitude and it can, like, that's dumb, it's stupid. And it was an interesting, if you haven't had a mind and you can get them, you should absolutely have somebody that's way better than me. And, you know, Dave Schultz, but Dave came up with sort of a philosophy like that. Like if you're going to complain about anything in the community, all you're doing is undermining your own readiness. Yeah. So if you say ESU is terrible and everything, then you're telling all of the people that work with you that the people that are responsible for your gear are not competent and therefore your gear's not ready. and therefore you're not ready to deploy and you won't be effective.
Yeah.
And guys are like, well, he's like, you realize you're saying that, right? And they, and he just blew guys' minds, and they finally started to get it like, oh, I shouldn't just be sitting here complaining, because by complaining, I'm basically saying I'm not ready.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of just doing something about it. So
Yeah.
I know I can hook you up with Dave. I mean, what a wonderful guy. I mean, I look up to him. He's just like such an amazing dude. And it has nothing to do with the fact that he won a Silver Star. It's like, he's just an amazing dude.
Yeah. I think when I was at Guam, if I remember right, he was RTO out there potentially.
Yeah.
So I remember the name, and I'm not super old, but I'm old enough that sometimes, names and places get mixed up, But yeah, from what I remember, he was a solid dude.
Yeah. He's still around, and he's around here, and he's just,
Okay.
yeah, he gets it on every level. We were watching some show, and it was like a SWAT show, or I don't know what my kids wanted to watch, and like their comms went out or something. And I kind of laughed because we did a debrief at the training unit, and one of the platoons came in and they said, well, this is crap, man. You give us crappy radios, and they didn't work. And Dave's there, and he goes, hey, he's the training officer at the time. He goes, hey, that's what happens in the real world. Yeah. You can't pay for that kind of training. And they're all looking like, there's the Silver Star winner. Like, are you gonna tell him that he doesn't know what he's talking about? And it was so wonderful. And he never did it. He never came from a place of like, I'm better than you or this.
Right.
It was always from a place of humility to just say, hey, you're not looking at this the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah, type thing. And it's like, I wish I could do that instead of, oftentimes I'm just the prick that does it.
Right. It's funny, actually, the last few interviews that I've done, a lot of it has been on, like one of them was purposeful, and then the other ones weren't, but perspective. Mm-hmm. It's funny when it's easy to have your perspective, and obviously when things don't go right, it's usually everybody else's fault and the gear's fault and this and that and the weather, always the weather. But then if you take that minute or two to actually look at how it looks from the different angles, sometimes it might be someone else's fault, and sometimes it might be a combination of things that all led up to, that's usually what comms is, a combination of things.
Yeah.
And then you can be like, okay, like I'm not going to attack this one thing. I have to actually go out and solve a few different problems so that hopefully next time this issue doesn't happen. Yeah. Perspective is interesting.
Yeah, it's just taking ownership of it, being the guy like, hey, I'm the one in charge.
Yeah.
It's my responsibility. That's my fault. And getting used to saying that is really hard. But I used to brief every chief that left the training unit, and they were all going back to be LCPOs. And I would just say, are you ready when you go? And they're like, absolutely, sir. Like, okay, yeah, of course you're bulletproof, Yeah. I said, no, like when you walk in the room, like people have this expectation of you. Do you have your speech ready? Like, do you know what you're going to say? Do you know what you're going to stand for and what you're going to tolerate and what you're not? And some guys like hadn't thought about it. And other guys like, yeah, I kind of thought about this. I'm like, okay, good. I want you to make sure that you understand that before you go in there, that you need to be ready. You can't just wing that.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, I got it, sir. And then I'd say, remember when you were in E5 and your chief was full of shit, right? He'd say something and you're like, that's BS. Like he did that.
Yeah.
I go, do you remember how quickly you could like sniff that out? Like, yeah, I go, because EOD guys and gals are like really smart. I go, so just take responsibility or admit when you're wrong, because that E5 can see through you the exact same way. So if you try that, you're never going to pull it over on them.
Right.
Every time they'll see through it. And you can see kind of the light came on like, oh, that's a little different. Like I'm not used to being kind of the guy in charge. I'm used to being the guy that commented about the guy in charge.
Yep.
And tell him how, like, oh, I wouldn't have done that. Like, oh no, that's super easy to say. And I had a million guys tell me about how I screwed up so many things in command and how they would have done it better. And one of the greatest moments of my life was always when I'd watch one of those guys finally be in charge and they make a mistake, and I'd be like, it's not so easy, is it? When you're the guy? Yeah. They're like, right. Now I see what you're saying. So I'm like, yeah, I go, you probably were right most times when you said that I screwed something up, but I'm just trying to make the point, like, it's not so easy when you're the guy that actually has to make the thing. So give people a break when you can, right?
Yep.
And just be ready when you make the mistake, just admit it.
Yeah.
Everybody's ready to move beyond it. Yeah.
Yeah. I've definitely found that when I take that road, vice no, I didn't do that. When you just, yep, I did that. Here's what I did. I'm ready for whatever you have. Here's what I've done to already start correcting that it usually goes way better for me. But two, like, I tend to come out better just personally on the other side, no matter what happens, whether somebody pushes something down that, I got to do extra stuff because it was a big deal or not. But
yeah, just raising your hand. Like, that was me. That's on me. That's my fault. And it's hard to say that. And it gets easier if you keep doing it, but it's really hard when you know it's someone else's. Like, I messed it up, but you're like, hey, they're one of my people. I probably should have stepped in there. Yeah. I didn't. That's my fault. You can almost always figure a reason as to why it's your fault when it's one of your guys that makes a mistake.
How was it as a junior officer, OIC of a team, and then having to do that?
Oh, take responsibility?
Yeah. Because that's a weird kind of position.
Yeah. I don't know. I messed some stuff up, and it was easy enough for me to admit that because I actually messed it up. But I don't know that my team messed up. There was one thing. Yeah, they went to the range, the Udari range in Kuwait, and blew up a bunch of stuff. And I think I wasn't on that trip. I think I can't remember what, but the guys that had gone on that came back, and I said, hey, make sure you check all your gear, that you don't have anything explosive, you don't have anything, but don't bring anything back. And we got back, and they did a inspection of our gears. They came in and they found, like, it wasn't anything bad, but there's like a depleted uranium round, and and there was some like live tracers and a couple things, like stuff that shouldn't have been in somebody's bag. And there's not really anything terrible is going to happen, and I got taken to the woodshed over that, and it was just like, I got it. Yep, that's on me, and I got killed by the XO. But I spent the entire weekend going through. I told everybody, bring all your bags in. Now everybody get out of here. And I went through every single person's bag and like picked through every single thing. And there's a couple of my guys that tried to help me, and I was like, I know this is a lawful order, but get the hell out of here. Yeah. Nobody's helping me. Like, this is my mess. I'm cleaning it up. I let it happen. Yeah. And part of that was, I probably should have. We were on the way home from deployment. I should have said something stronger. They probably should have known. But, and the other part was just sort of letting everybody know, like, hey, maybe you don't care but this is what I'm going to do. Yeah. If you make a big mistake, I'm going to fix it, and I'm not going to let you help me fix it. Yeah. You made the mistake, but I'm going to take responsibility for the mistake, and then I'm going to go fix the mistake. And I hope that kind of got the message across, like, or maybe you want to see me suffer, maybe. Yeah, right. But they didn't make many mistakes. My first team, and I had just some amazing, amazing people that went on to be very successful in the community. And so it was really pretty easy. My first tour was, it wasn't hard. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think that the team in that scenario understood and like were a little more aware that, one, you were willing to just take it, but then also you were willing to do the backside of that and like kind of protect the team, as well as solve the problem?
Yeah, I think they understood that I was all in on helping them, and it almost to my detriment on a few cases. But I would walk around the command and tell everybody, anytime one of my guys did something well, I would just go up into ops and just start, hey, did you hear what Mike did? And so all of them, while they were on the team, got promoted.
Nice.
Every single one of them made the next rank.
That's cool.
And it was, so I went out of my way, but at the same time, the hard part about being a junior OIC, like if you asked one of those guys today, they probably would have a pretty high opinion of me that, I went and did it, maybe not. But you realize as you get older that maybe not all of the decisions were right, because at the end of the day, you're a naval officer, and it's about loyalty to the institution over loyalty to the individual. It's about what's the best thing for the community and the Navy and the nation. And then you also try and do as best you can for your people. But you can't be clouded by individual loyalty. And that's why you're there as an officer. and you have to have institutional loyalty there. Now, for some guys, that comes super easy, like they don't care about
Yeah.
people at all, right? But for me, I probably was a little the other way, and I started to learn that there was an EM1 on my ship, and we were at a bar at some port stop, and I saw him, and great dude, he taught me a lot, and I said, hey, EM1, let me buy you a beer. You and the guys are here. You guys have been working hard, and he sent the guys off to, with the $5 or whatever it cost for a pitcher back then to do it. And he's like, hey, sir, we know you try real hard and that you care about us, but you need to quit doing so much with that, because you'll never make it to the rank to make a significant difference if you fight every freaking battle.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, holy crap. Like, here's this guy, sage dude that's just going, yes, I do appreciate when you stick up for me and you do something, but you're a good dude. You'll do some good one day, but not if you fight every battle. That's when I sort of started. I mean, like, I remember these seminal moments in my life when I started to grow up. And the funny part was almost every one of them was when some enlisted guy pulled me to the side.
Really?
And was like, hey, I don't think you should do that, or like, that's not the right approach, and it was always like, oh. And I found that I got my most frank, my most honest feedback, because oftentimes a lot of the officers, they were cautious about what they'd say. And these guys were just like, hey, sir, you're fucking this up. And I'm like, okay, can you give a little more than that? Like, I know, but.
That's funny. The difference between, how do I say this? Was there a difference between you and the chief on the first team versus the second team? So the first team being, you've got some fleet experience, you've got a little bit of minesweeper experience, so you have that realm of EOD kind of to an extent, right? Yeah. But overall EOD, you're a basically new guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the chief is, been doing it for a while, potentially. And then the second team, you've got, a full round of experience going into it. Was there a difference in the interactions?
Yeah, probably. So I only did one deployment at Mobile Unit 2 as an OIC, and then I went back. That's when they were doing, let's send a guy out to be the staff guy on the carrier. But it was just they sent. So very different in that regard. And then, but I'll talk about that and then on to my shore detachment. Yeah. The first one was great because I had two guys. When we talked earlier about, who's still out there that understands how to do mine warfare. Mm-hmm. Well, one of my guys was Roy Hunt, right? Remember? Yeah. Yeah. So Roy taught me just a ton, right, on everything. And it was never one of those pieces because Roy just knew more than me, like in regards of all this stuff. And if he didn't, he would just look at me and go, hey, Danny, I don't know how, because he called everybody Danny. He said, I don't know how to do that. And he would just say that, like, can you help me with that? So there was never any argument because it was either he knew it way better than me, there's no question, or he knew that I knew some of this fleet stuff better. And so we worked really well. And then my other chief was Mick Gormley, who was just a legend. That guy taught me a ton, but Mick knew everything. And the stuff that he didn't, we had a great relationship. Same thing. He'd just go, I don't know that, or hey, why don't you give me a take on this? And we got along fantastic. Like there wasn't like these, I looked to these guys to make me a better EOD tech. Yeah. And when I pinned on senior tech, I had both of them come up and do the senior tech thing. Like I looked at them as like, these are the guys that are going to teach me and train me through all this stuff. And I think I gave them something because I had that fleet stuff. Mm-hmm. But then you get to the second one, and now I'm on the admiral staff. And then all I did was I spent the entire time trying to get those guys off the ship. Yeah. My goal was if I can get them 50% off the boat to go do training. And so to this surface warfare admiral who was just a really difficult guy, but we managed to almost 50% of the time they had, somebody was off the boat. That's awesome. So 50% of the team was off doing training, and I convinced and exercises and everything. So a very different relationship. So it was like, they really appreciated that. Yeah. So I didn't really make them do anything that sucked. Yeah. So I was just like, hey, can you do this for us? And then you fast forward to Newport, and I had a great senior chief up there, Bill Graves, just like this giant of a man. but we kind of butted heads a little bit. I think because I knew enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And that was like a huge mistake that I made. And I think it's what you're talking about there.
Yeah.
It was like, I was a senior tech. I knew like enough. I'd done a few things, and we kind of butted heads on running some things. And there was like one point when I think I was running a dive site or something or whatever it was. And he's like, why are you doing this and that? I'm just like, and I didn't have a smart ass answer, it's just like, oh, he goes, you're doing like 100% the wrong thing there.
Yeah.
You totally missed it. And it was great because it brought some humility back. And I was never, like, no one would ever describe me knew me when I was young as humble. Like, that wasn't it.
Yeah.
So then I just worked the rest of my career to try, and I still wasn't great at it, but I really tried. Like that when Bill kind of jacked me up on that, it was like, oh, yeah, I need to take a step back. I don't know everything. And even when I went and got my master badge and everything like that back in the old days, I still realized it's like people used to say, what is it, like the most dangerous jumper has like between 100 and 1,000 jumps or something like that. Yeah, like I knew enough to run an op, and like I knew that stuff, but I kind of realized at that point, like I needed to defer to these guys that really had been there and done that over. And back in my day, these guys had 17, 18 years in as chiefs and senior chiefs. It wasn't like when I was at the training unit where you'd have somebody like, oh man, you're a 7-year senior chief. That's awesome. You never been an LPO? You're an LCPO for like a day.
Right.
And it wasn't an LCPO of anything. It was at the training thing, and it wasn't. And then like, oh goodness. Yeah, this is nothing against that guy or gal. That's the system that they went. But I fought hard to work with the community managers, because we had some ridiculous thing. Like, I had more E7s than I had E6s by a lot at the training, because they're like, oh, you need to be an expert thing. And I'm like, we need to roll a bunch of these billets down. We need to roll a bunch of these E7 billets down to E6. And everybody was like, shut up, Lions, we hate you. But I'm like, as a community, we had more E7 than E6 billets.
Right.
I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, it doesn't give guys an opportunity. And I would say this to guys all the time. They come in and they're a chief, right? And they're one of the best chiefs, and they're getting ready to go. And I go, you're about that far from becoming a senior chief. And like, yeah. I go, don't hurry.
Right.
Like, but I'm like, I know you want more money, and your family deserves it, and you guys are great. I'm like, I go, but don't hurry, because if you go become a senior chief and you run and you do great, and suddenly you're the number one guy, you're going to wake up and you're going to be a mass chief and you're going to be done operating.
Yeah.
And I said, so just don't rush. And they're like, I didn't really think of it like that. I go, yeah. I said, I know it sucks, but just take your time. I'm like, you 2 years from now as a chief is better than you today as a chief, right? I go, I know you want to be a senior chief, but I go, me 2 years from now, I hope is better than me today.
Yeah.
I said, so just, there's no substitute for 400 mid watches.
Yeah.
There just isn't. So please take some time. Like, just slow your roll a little bit. Like, I know you want to make it, but you will be better. I go, because if you have to learn your job while you're doing it, who suffers? Your guys do. Yeah. Right? You don't.
Right.
Yeah, everybody under you. I go, so it's selfish. And they're like, okay, see you later, sir. Right?
Yeah, that's true. There's, we're obviously still having those same conversations. And, one of the way I look at it is, and it was presented to me this way, that the longer you're at whatever level you're at, right, the more chances you have to have situations come up. And just like with EOD, right, we don't go out and do one IED drill, pass it, and say we're good for life. You go out and you do a ton of them, all different kinds, whether they're roadside or, on foot, all walks, right? So that you have more tools in your bag when you come on to the real thing. Just like when, as a chief, you've got a couple people under you and you can help out with a few other people. And then as a senior chief, you have a lot more. And then as a master chief, you have a lot more. And you fly up to master chief and you've had a handful of experiences, and now you're responsible for all of those people under you, and new experiences are happening every time. That's going to be overwhelming, exhausting, all of the words you can think of. Yeah. And then, or I should say, as opposed to, you don't rush, you just do your job, do it well, get those experiences as they come, don't necessarily look for all the bad ones, but just, as they come, deal with them. And then when you get in that position, you won't have to go to somebody every single time.
Yeah.
You'll actually have some of the answers because you've dealt with them when you've had people above you to help you with it. I think I 100% agree that most people, I think, especially right now with the promotion the way it is, don't look at it that way. They just look at it that's an extra $500 a month or $300 a month or whatever it is,
And you're shortchanging the people underneath you by not getting the sets and reps ahead of time. Yeah.
Right.
Two stories, quick, maybe not, right? So the first one was Jamie Hurdell, right?
Yeah.
So Jamie made Mass Chief, and I mean, I love Jamie. He was an E5, I think, when I was a lieutenant. We were both Momina 2 together. And he wanted to come be the N7 Master Chief at the training unit. And he made Mass Chief, and I was like, no. I'm like, this is not a first Master Chief tour. And it's not that you're not competent. It's not that you haven't done like 175 deployments. Like you've been, right. There's no question about that. You are one of our like best EOD techs out there. I'm like, you just need some more time as a Master Chief running ops or training or something in a Mobian in a little bit smaller thing than coming here and running training for the entire East Coast.
Yeah.
Right? I go, it's just, you need, I go, not that you're not ready, not that you couldn't do it. I go, but why don't you spend a little bit more time and then come here and do it? Because then you're going to be even better. And, the word got to him without me saying it. And then he was upset. And I saw him the one time and I'm like, hey, right. And, he could have killed me right there. He was like bigger than me. And so I told him and he's like, okay, I see what you're saying. He's like, I don't like it, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so that was good. But I always tried to make a point of doing that. Same thing with Jody Carpenter. He showed up right out of Dam Neck and he was senior chief. He came in my office and, he's got like really pale white skin. And so we're talking. And I'm like, I'm so glad that you're here. Like we're trying to get the soft program off the ground. And I know you have tremendous experience from, where you were in the past. So you kind of that firsthand knowledge and being able to help guys is going to be just invaluable. We're going to put you in this leadership role to help with this. I said, but, you're not ready to be a Master Chief. And I mean, like from a white complexion to like just red.
Yeah.
It's just me and him in the office. And I'm thinking, man, I really should have somebody else in here with me. I'm this small guy that he could just kill right here. And I said, hey, Jody, I'm not saying you're not an amazing operator. I'm not saying you don't have all of the operational and tactical experience. Like you 100% are ready for that. I go, but Master Chiefs are different. Master Chiefs need to understand big picture programmatics before they go to be a Master Chief, right? You need to kind of flex those muscles. Like you don't have to flex those as much as a senior chief.
Right.
I go, you were, down at Dam Neck, like, how many times you could do a PRT? And he's like, kind of laughs at him. I go, you need to know the PRT instruction. You need to know it cold so that one of your sailors does that. I'm like, can you read an EDVR? I'm like, can you read it and know exactly what's it? Or, like who's coming in the next thing with a set of orders and like, how about the fitness report instructions? You know exactly when each one is due so you can set that up to maximize like your EPs and who's going to come in. He's looking at me like, I'm like, I know you know some of this, but I need you to be great at it so you can be a great Master Chief.
Yeah.
And he's like, and all the color come back. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm going to live. That's good. And he's like, okay, I got it. I go, and I'm going to put you in that. I go, it's not going to take long.
Yeah.
I said, you need about a year, and I want to just throw stuff at you like this because you're going to pick it up. And, within a year, he did all that stuff. He embraced it. He did it, and he made Master Chief right after that. And I think it made him better as a Master Chief because he used that year to do it, to be ready. It wasn't just, I got to rush in and do it, right?
Yeah.
And I think I even put it on the first evaluation, like, top performer just showed up on board, like, nothing crazy on the thing. But then on the next one, he was my number one thing. And then, he made it right off of that. And it wasn't just because I made him the number one guy in the thing. His record spoke for itself.
Right.
I just acknowledged that to the board. So, yeah.
Nice. Backing up just a little bit, something that, we do differently for the officer community now, but how was doing a senior board and a master board as an officer back when you did both?
Yeah. The senior board was, it's pretty straightforward, right? It's a whole bunch of questions. Like that was almost unfair. I could have passed my senior board probably, a couple months in because it was just this huge bank of questions. And I always thought like I'd heard about it in the old days where they actually had you get into the tools and everything like that. But then for some reason they stopped doing that. It didn't make any sense to me, but I went and I tried to understand the tools as well as I can. I certainly wasn't anywhere near as good as all my guys were with it, but I thought that was kind of like, the knowledge, that part typically isn't hard to know it. It's like practical parts.
Right.
The master board was, it was good. It was kind of planning an op. And I think like that element of it goes onto the officer board a little bit more with sort of at a bit higher level. Like you don't need to be the person necessarily planning. You got to understand it. So I kind of like the way that it is now with that part. I thought it was good, doing the master board. Any challenge, anything I could do to kind of make me a better EOD tech, I was all for. I didn't complain about it. I didn't think. I was like, oh, okay, I'll do that one. And so I could like technically say, oh, I have a master badge. And everybody's like, oh, really? I couldn't tell because you don't know what the hell you're doing. But at least I could be like, oh, I'm one of those guys that actually I went through the whole master board. And in fact, the guy that was the chair of my master board, I'm doing some construction work for him right now. I see him the other day. Yeah, he's just Jim Bean, just what a wonderful human being. Like a 40-year captain, LDO, second class diver before. But I mean, like he put me through that master board, and it was just like, man, hey, talk about guys in between him and something like just knew their stuff. They just put me through the ringer.
Yeah,
and it was great. I mean, it really was.
Yeah. So the debt life. How did you prefer debt vice mobile unit as like OIC, or which one did you like more, or did you?
Yeah, so like in comparison between debt Newport, my short debt, and then being at the mobile unit and being on the debt there. Yeah.
Yep. Because I guess back then they were both debts.
Yeah, they switched to the platoon. So, I would say I liked the energy of the mobile unit. I liked being around all these different people and people coming out of their cages and talking about stuff. And, like the internet was just kind of getting going back then.
Yeah.
So guys would have articles and things, and we'd pass back and forth, and you'd see somebody out dirt diving something, and you'd ask them, and we were all pretty close, like back in the cages at mobile unit too. They're just, everything was right in those little cages in the back. And so you got a lot of information and knowledge. The shortette was good. It was a nice break. But I mean, we did a few things here and there, and you get some stuff you got to go blow up from the shellfish thing, and you found a couple things, and it was nothing, terribly exciting. 9/11 happened while I was there, and then of course we had to search everything in all of New England, right? Because everybody overreacted, like, oh, the terrorists are going to hit the war college. Oh, the terrorists are going to hit the. And so we went and like did all this stuff, and so that part was. That was brutal, because it was just like, you ask anybody from back then, it was just complete reactionary to everything. And so you're what was supposed to be sort of I tell the story, the last day of my, what do they call it, the RAV for the
RAV,
to do it. The last day of that was September 11th.
Really?
So like the guys were up there to do the thing, and I'm thinking, this is the last thing I got to do for like the next year. I have like a year where I could finish my master's, and I had just been dating my wife, and I'm like, I could spend a little more time and it happened. It's like,
all changed.
And I just kind of chuckled, and I'm like, that's your luck, right? Thing. And I shouldn't say that. My life has worked out wonderfully, but it was, it was interesting. Yeah. Going from sort of 0 to 60, and we went to try and search all the submarines in Groton because they told us we had to. We got there at 2 a.m, and they're like, you're not getting on the submarine. You're not in the TLD program. I'm like, are you, like, here's the order from, they're like, I don't care what that says. You're not getting. So we got there, and they got everybody in at 5 something, and they put us through the whole nuke training thing, and they got the TLDs, and we went at like 4 o'clock that afternoon. We finally got in the water and searched along with the local dive team, and
jeez,
just like like we think we're big checklist guys,
right?
And the submarine guys are like, no, you're not getting in the water.
Yeah. Like big Navy in general, if they have a rule, they're sticking with it unless somebody pretty high up is telling them not to, and then you add on to that submarine. Yeah.
And it's good to, like, I remember when I went to go back to the carrier and the detail called me, and I kind of knew that I was going to the carrier because that's all they were offering.
Yeah.
And I said, they're like, you're going to go back to the carrier. I said, okay, sir. I'm happy to go back. Can I get one out of Norfolk? They're like, sure. They're like, you're the first call here. I'm like, okay. Can I get one that has an aviator in charge? He's like, sure. Like, that's all I want. Thanks. I've done 2 with SWOs, and I'm like,
yeah.
I was a SWO myself. I didn't think so. But they always joked was the aviation guys would joke with the SWO guys and say, you read an instruction. If it doesn't say you can do it, SWOs won't do it. If it doesn't say you can't do it, then the aviators will do it, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And so I always liked that kind of that. And it doesn't always hold like that, but it was neat where you can kind of find your way to get into the right answer by asking the right person, like especially on the fleet staff. Like I had a SWO and an aviator boss, and I'd always like go to the aviator one. I need to get stuff done. Like, hey, sir, can you? Yeah.
I actually definitely saw that on my last deployment, on the carrier, going up and sitting in those meetings, and when everybody's going back and forth, and you can just see the side that they're on. Like, okay, yep, he's the one that doesn't want to do it because it doesn't say you can. He's the one that wants to do it because it doesn't say you can't.
Yeah.
Like, this is gonna be. I just sat in the back and just smiled, had a good time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you ever felt this way when you get amongst like some more senior officers and you're more junior. Like I remember this when I was like lieutenant, and I sit in that room and I go, that doesn't make sense, but maybe I just don't have enough experience. Maybe I just haven't been there, and I don't really understand how a commander or captain thinks, or the admiral. And you get more and more senior, and you go, oh no, that didn't make sense.
Yeah.
So like the piece of advice is trust your gut.
Yeah.
Like if something doesn't seem right, you're probably right. It largely doesn't have to do with. It's not that you're not a captain. Like that doesn't really matter. It's just they just don't want to do it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Or they're making
Absolutely.
an excuse for things. So that gut thing that's saying, that seems like they just don't want to do it. Like, you're probably right.
Yeah. Absolutely. So after the debt, what'd you get into?
Oh gosh, what was next? So, then went to the Truman on the strike group.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's when we started the war, doing the strikes there, and I worked. It was pretty cool. I worked for a guy named Admiral Stufflebeam. Boomer was his call sign. F-14 guy. Actually played punter for the Detroit Lions.
Really?
Yeah, big dude. Just, what an amazing guy. Like, if you just pictured your stereotypical like aviator that was just sort of larger than life, and he was just a great guy. But when we talked, we had the most tremendous amount of respect for each other, but we didn't understand each other at all. Like we didn't,
Gotcha.
like we never would have been friends.
Yeah.
But he trusted me and I trusted him, and like we worked well together, but just like nothing in common, just very, very strange.
Yeah.
But I was, since I had done a carrier deployment already, I was already qualified as battle watch captain. So I got there, and you usually don't do 2.
Yeah.
That was my 3rd carrier, right? So I get in there and I'm looking around and going, and back then we were the only guys in camis.
Yeah.
So just like, oh, it's the guy in camis. Like, oh, I know how to be the battle watch captain. I'm like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'm qualified. So I'm like, okay, do you want to stay? I was like, sure. So I went in and I started staying and watching. Then I'm like training the other guys that are doing it. And it's people come in, it's right at the beginning of the war. And they come in and there's me in camis, and I'm like, who you looking for? Look for the battle watch captain. I'm like, I'm the battle watch captain. You can always see in the first, like, oh, isn't that cute? Look at you in your camis. Like, yeah. Sure, you're the battle watch captain. Oh, where did he go? Like, who left you here? So, these guys that come in, and you learn enough, like, oh, you're the E2 guy, right? Yeah, okay, cool. Like, you're going to come in here and you think, like, you're going to go over, feet dry? Like, they're like, well, like, you're not. You're going to stay overhead and, feet wet, and you're going to relay signals back to the thing. Like, we're like, oh no, like, I know the plan. Like, it's not like, here's the link picture. It's not that hard. Yeah. So, you go and do these things. And I remember I was sitting there, and I think I got a call from the 6th Fleet staff, right? And this guy's an 04. I'm an 04. Right? He just happened to go to the 6th Fleet staff, and I'm here. Like, okay, Lieutenant Commander Lyon. He said, yeah, I need to know, or Admiral Fry, who was the fleet commander at the time, needs to know all of the bombs that were dropped in the kill box, whatever, today from the planes that we sent over, because we were sending them from 6th Fleet over into 5th Fleet to execute kill boxes. But basically, once you push the planes, you don't have control of them anymore.
Right.
They were going to CENTCOM for sorties. And I'm thinking, well, I'm thinking to myself, like, why does he need to know that?
Yeah.
Like, the CENTCOM commander is going to brief but like, you're kind of, who are you going to brief? Like,
Yeah.
Like, you just want this.
Just want to know.
And then I'm thinking even further, because my admiral was like really good friends with him. And like, you know what? I bet you this guy just wants this information for himself. And I said, okay, so Admiral Fry wants this. He said, yeah, he needs to know this, the thing. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to wake up Admiral Stufflebeam. It was because I only stood the mid-watch. So where should he call Admiral Fry? And the guy's like, well, what do you mean? I go, well, I mean, Admiral Stufflebeam, he never told me this, but I'm like, he said, if Admiral Fry wants something, he wants to pass that information directly to his boss. And you hear this guy like, well, I like, is he in his cabin? Is he on the KY-68? Should he call him in, the stew phone? Or, and, like I have all the numbers for Admiral Fry.
Yeah.
And you can see he's like, and so I just decided, I'm like, all right, listen, you motherfucker, don't you ever fucking call me again and say, in the name of the Admiral, I need this. I go, you ended up at 6th Fleet, you're another fucking 04. I go, be a fucking man and call me and say you need this shit. And so, the guy's like, well, like, I go, if you just asked me, I'd have tried to find the stuff out for you. But don't you dare do that again.
Yeah.
All right? So the guy gets up. So they were on a different rotation than us. Next day, same thing. Next day, same thing.
Really?
Right? And so I go to breakfast that morning, and I sit down, and Admiral Stufflebeam's there, and he's like, so you having a little time with 6th Fleet last night? I was like, oh, man, my big mouth again. Only time I pull my foot out is to switch feet. And so I just looked at him, and he goes, yeah, they shouldn't have been asking for that stuff. I give it every morning on the brief. And I said, sir, this is what I was thinking. Those guys are doing double or triple sorties, sitting in that plane. They're dropping these bombs. They're coming all the way back. They're landing on the carrier. They're 8-9 hours in the air. They're going to Civic. They're debriefing. And I'm thinking, the only way I'm going to get that information is if I go back there and I start bothering those guys. I'm like, I wasn't going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to take this aviator that, usually I think, oh, aviators, you're kind of soft. Like, not these guys. When they were doing that, they were doing hardcore all the way from the med, all the way into the kill box, do the whole kill box thing.
That's
come
a long
back.
flight.
Yeah. And I said, I just wasn't going to do it. And he's like, good. And I'm like, man, I got an ally now.
Yeah.
And so from that point forward, everybody in the theater, the UCOM commander, some chief from here would be calling. They'd call the TAO. They'd get on chat. Every guy'd come in like, hey, sir, I need you to take care of this thing. Like, this is about a watch, Captain. We're not going to give you that information. What's your name? I'm like, do you want my social too? You gonna fire me and pass it? And so, but nothing ever came of it because they all realized they just wanted the information from themselves.
Right.
On the other hand, there's a bunch of guys calling me like, hey, Lenny, I need it. Like, oh, sure. Let me see if I can put it together for you.
Yeah.
But don't give me in the name of the Admiral.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That is extremely frustrating when somebody comes up, and it's obvious too that they're just using someone else's name because of the rank behind it.
Yeah.
It's like, and for something that it's most frustrating for something that's not even going to actually benefit them other than them knowing it,
Right.
like, come on, people.
When I was at 68, I would send, we didn't have a very deep staff, so I would send lieutenants all the time or senior chiefs to the planning conferences, and we needed to get stuff done. So I would send what I wanted to get done up to the fleet commander and say, hey, sir, these are the training objectives, and they're aligned with, your objectives. I checked with your guys. I think this is the stuff that we need to get done for drills. It's not a lot of stuff, but I think it'll help us at this, and these will simulate these 2 O plans. And you'd be like, okay, approved. I'd print that out and I go, here you go. Like, what's this, sir? I'm like, this is your get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
Because when you go in there, there's going to be an 05 running that thing, and he's going to tell you to pack sand, and I'm not doing it. You just be like, practice this with me. Sir, I apologize. I don't have the authority to agree with you. And I go, and then they're going to say, are you threatening me? And then they're going to be like, sir, I'm not threatening you. I have a message from the Admiral, right, from my boss at 06 that was approved by the 3-star that says these are the things that he wants in this exercise. I can't make you do it, but I do have to let him know if I can't. He's like, are you threatening? I'm like, not threatening you, sir. I'm just telling you. Like, I came with this piece of paper, and the 3-star Admiral, like, here, said that I had to get these things in the exercise.
Yeah.
Every time. And they come back, they're like, that was great. I'm like, I go, I know, because I wasn't going to send you to get slaughtered.
Right.
Because I knew what would happen. Some Army 05 would just start screaming at you. Be like, you have one of these? I do. Yeah.
Yeah. That actually brings up a question. And he kind of alluded to it before, made me think of it. So in general, well, I'll ask this question first.
Yeah.
Do you think that officers have to be a little more careful with how hard they push on things to, I don't want to say protect their career, but it seems like from the non-officer side that an officer's career can get stifled if they go up against the wrong person in the wrong way.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment to an extent?
Oh, I think it's 100% fair assessment. And I think this is where it kind of breaks down, right? So, like, I'm the king of the morons, right? So I'm the guy that screened third look XO, like just barely, second look command. And that was probably only because my boss was on the board. And then third look major command, right? So, like, the only thing I screened first look was sequential major command. And I called the detail. I said, I screened first look. And he's like, everybody does. I'm like, come on. I was going to
Just give me the win.
Just give me the win, right? So I looked at everything as a blessing.
Yeah.
And I just, if I thought something wasn't right, I pushed back on it. And I kept going. And I mean, I did a lot of stuff where I was just like, I don't have a chance of making probably the next rank, or I might not even screen for the next thing. But my only expectation was I wanted to do my 20 years. I didn't want to retire as an 04 if I could help it, right?
Yeah.
As a commander would have been fine. I had 04 command. So I already had a command of one of the EOD mobile units, the reserve ones that they shut down. Okay. So I was like, okay, I got command too. So I was very fortunate. So even if I didn't screen for 05 command, I was like, that's okay. And so I didn't mind pushing really hard.
Yeah.
Now, I watched a lot of people be concerned with it that were kind of first look people, right? And this doesn't hold to everybody.
Right.
But the guys that were there, it's like, you are on the fast track. Like, you are one of the guys that has a chance of making flag. And so you're less likely to push back sometimes on stuff. I probably did it the wrong way a lot of times. I probably could have done it more diplomatically. And some of the guys probably did it probably better than I did, even though that I don't think they pushed hard enough. And this was, if you ask me most of the time about guys that I served with, like other officers that I knew and served around, I really liked these guys and I had a lot of respect for them. But at the same time, I would give them a really hard time because I'm like, you're leading the best people in the Navy. So that's not good enough to just kind of do it.
Yeah.
And like, well, fuck you. And I'm like, oh, hey, I got it. But you could have done better. Like, well, I'm like, you could have. You could have gotten that done. You didn't. And and I pissed off a lot of people along the way, right? And it's like, it's surprising I made 06, right? But I think the second you start thinking about your career, it stops you from doing the right thing. And you don't have to be a jackass like me and push that hard. Right. But you do need to push back when something's not right. And it could be kind of a roundabout way, or you reattack it, or you bring it in to thing. But you need to, you owe the guys and gals underneath you to better than that. You really should. And if it means that you have to, like, so as an example, when I was an 05 CO, we were running the training unit and they said, I need you to push more platoons through. And I said, I did the math. We don't have the people to do it. It's like, well, just work harder, do more. And I said, hey, sir. Well, first I got it from the other 05 COs, right? Like, I need to get these teams through. And I'm like, hey, man, you want me to push my guys harder? Like, yeah, they should be working more. Like, because I need to get these teams through. I go, who do you think those guys are? They're dudes you just sent me. They just did 5 years and like 3 deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm like, do you really want to push them that hard? Do you want me to not give them time off so I could send them back to you just wiped? Right. I go, there's some magical pool of dudes at the training unit. Right. Like, they're all the guys that are just you killed and you send here so that I can try and help them regenerate and get their master board and everything. Yeah. I shouldn't say we, right? Because I did very little other than I'm there to, champion for resources. But I think it was it's super important to make sure you're taking care of those guys as you're going through there and doing the right thing by them and making sure that they get the time to rest and relax and go. Yeah, it's just, I didn't, anyway, it's bothered me. I'm going to go off that one. So anyway, the thing with my boss, he finally got to his limit. He's like, you need to push more platoons through. And I said, sir, in the Rock and Poe, it says this many, that's how many I'm pushing through. I'm not going to push any more through than that. And he's like, well, what if I tell you? I go, well, then you could fire me if you'd like. And he's like, oh, I'm like, I'm not kidding. I'm serious. Like, then you're going to have to fire me. Because I'm sure you could find someone else to do it, but I'm not going to do it. Just won't. And kind of stopped. And, we didn't get along all that well, that it's, but, we eventually kind of grew to like each other. You can probably figure out who that person was, but I won't mention their name.
Yeah.
But you have to do something like that. I mean, there was another time, there was one of the COs, and the guys came in my office and said, hey, sir, we just had 2 kids join the NSAW Special Warfare Platoon. I'm like, what do you mean? We're like 6 weeks into the training. Like, well, they need to bump it up to 10 or whatever it was. Like, it went from, a regular platoon to 10 or 12 people. And like, were they on another team? And so, they came off and they've done the training and they just got back. And so they're, like, they're right out of school. I'm like, we've had 3 wounded in action in that deployment in the last 2 weeks. And you're going to send 2. So I called the CO, and he was, just came unglued on me.
Yeah.
Don't you fucking tell me how to handle it. I'm like, hey man, I go, what you're doing is wrong. And I'm going to go tell on you now. I go, cause you're violating the policy that people have to go through the full training cycle. Well, I can wait. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I go, you don't have any kids. You don't understand that. I'm like, you know how many guys that I know that have kids in the program right now? And you're going to send them to the most dangerous deployment and give them half of the training, and they got no training with you? Like, fuck you, Lenny. But I'm like, fine. And I'm picking up the phone and I'm telling on you. And I hung up that. I'm like, Commodore, I got something. Those guys got pulled off the thing. But it was like, you have to do that. I could have gotten lambasted by the Commodore and thing, like, you've gotten this guy's business and everything, but that's what you got to do. You got to push back against things that don't make sense. Not against everything. That was what the EM1 told me, right?
Yeah.
Like, stop fighting the thing. So it was more natural for me to push back. Maybe it's not as natural for other guys.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I'm sure from your perspective, you could probably tell me a lot of stories of actions that you were disappointed, right? That somebody didn't push harder for. Yeah.
Well, where I was seeing if it was similar, and I have a certain mindset, and I don't know if everybody does, but so like you said, an unwritten rule that if you push too much, your career could get stifled as an officer. On the enlisted side, it seems like you can push a lot harder, and it's a lot harder for you to have somebody that doesn't like you be able to just shut you down. Right. Were there times, especially as you were a junior officer, because I think that's where it applies a little more, were there times where your senior enlisted were like, hey, I've got this one. I can go in and fight this battle. Not because you can't, but because, hey, Lenny, like you said, they've said before, you're a good dude, but you don't need to fight every battle. I'll get this one. So if it goes wrong, I get yelled at. Everything's fine tomorrow when I wake up. Yeah. And you're also still fine. Did that ever happen, or did you ever see that?
No, I think I was the idiot. I fought it, and they're all like, hey, that's cool. Because I don't need to get yelled at. Now, it's interesting.
That's funny.
You break that. Yeah, I definitely, I fought more than I should have. I called people names when I shouldn't have. I'd made so many mistakes along the way. You couldn't. Hopefully, there's a few people out there that would say, "Hey, Leonard's a pretty good guy."
Yeah.
But it was interesting. That came into play the most for me when I was at 68.
Okay.
Because what I did, I had Force Mass Chief was my senior enlisted back then, Rick's training, and we got along great, right? But I would say to him, "I need you to go take care of this problem." And it wasn't because I wasn't going to take care of it. It was because I wanted, especially when it was down the chain of command, I want you to go and give the guy a free roll.
Yeah.
Because you recognize the behavior is wrong. So I'm empowering you to go and do that. And you can go with my authority. So if the guy tells you, like, get out or the thing, you could say it and be like, just so you know, sir, Commodore's aware of this. He sent me here for a reason, right? To give you this thing. And I would, each time that he did that, he would do it better and better and better, to the point where I would then give him sort of pieces of my authority and let him go push people around.
Yeah.
I think he enjoyed it, but he was so good. He was so good at it, right? And it culminated in this event where Admiral Fogo was the fleet commander, and then he came back as Navier, right? So there's the 4-star. And he said, before I left, I told you guys to move the Desron from Naples to Rota. And now that I'm back, I already told my good friend at PERS, he's sending the next Commodore to Rota. So figure it out. So the whole staff's looking. And I mean, Jamie Fogo was like this huge dude. He was like a Rhodes Scholar and he could speak fluent French, but he was like an enormous guy. Like, he's just like one of those guys, like amazing, incredibly well written, well spoken, the thing, and also like big. Right?
Yeah.
And everybody's just looking like, oh my God, because you can't outdo him in any way. Right?
Yeah.
Like, he's just smarter, better than you, right? So I'm listening on the call and I go, I think I got it. We have an extra space. And we can move like these guys over here, but we have to take this one space and turn it into a secret space so we can move like that. And I'm like, with spaces I kind of have under my control, I think I can do this, and I can give them a temporary space to start, kind of if they want to send people here to kind of work out of.
Yeah.
So I called him up and I said, hey, sir, I go, I think I can make this work, but I need from you to know that if anybody gets in my way, I can say in the name of the Admiral, and like, it's not just be
Right.
BSing it, because I hate that. I'm like, I need to know you got my. He's like,
Yep.
Tell me your plan. He's like, absolutely. If you need me to call somebody, you tell me. I said, okay, so like weapons free. Like, he's like, weapons free. If you can make this thing happen in the timeline I want and get me that space, I said, I'll do it, sir. So I go to Rick and I said, all right, here's the first challenge. I go, we need to get that building certified for secret in 3 weeks. Right? You can imagine, right? And Rick's just like, oh, I'm on it. He's just like,
Just loves the challenge.
Oh yeah. He's just like, and I'm like, and you have the full authority of the 4-star behind you. Anything you need. Admiral Focus, he was like, he listened to the call with me and he heard his words. Like, whatever you need, I will make it happen. And Rick went and just beat the crap out of a bunch of 05s and 06s. Like, sir, I know I can't tell you what to do, but who do you need to call? You need a 1-star, 3-star, 4-star? You just tell me, because I'm going to get them on the phone and they're going to call you. And then, you're going to either get it done or you need to tell me and then I'll go tell on you.
Yeah.
And he went around and he single-handedly got this thing through to where we were able to move all these things and do it just because, like, we had that direction from the Admiral. We made sure we had the thing all the way down, and I was able to push that, and he was able to take care of it. And I didn't really even have to get involved.
That's awesome.
So it was kind of different than the question you're asking.
Yeah, but
it was like the coolest thing. And Rick used to say, like, I love the fact that you give me your authority because it's super helpful to know where I stand. And I don't have to guess and question. Like, I think the Commodore, like, I'm like, you got it. I'm 100% behind you, whatever you do, even if it's wrong.
Yeah.
I will back you up. And he solved so many problems for me. He was just so good at it because once he knew, like, they got my back. I actually have the authority to go. And I don't think we do that enough.
I agree.
I don't think we push that down enough to say, Senior, this is yours. You got it. I mean, we did that at the training unit when the guys came up with the system, the manual working group. Here. I mean, something stupid, right?
Yeah.
The number of cable TV boxes we can have in the command is down to 10.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not making this decision. I wrote an order, gave it to the manual working group, said, figure it out. And, oh, by the way, you don't have to have one in my office or the exos. Like, we don't need a cable box. I want you to focus on the crew and the students first. And then I'm like, don't think for 1 second. You go fix it. And then guys would come up and go, hey, sir, we don't have a cable box. I'm like, you have to talk to Senior Chief, Brian, Senior Chief Burton. I'm like, you have to, he's the guy that made the decision.
Yeah.
Manual group, I'm like, don't you have an LCPO? I'm like, they're the ones that made the decision. Did you talk to them? I'm like, I didn't make the decision. I'm like, I just approved it. I go, those guys were great. And I would just push this stuff down to them. And it got to the point where they ran that whole command. I mean, I would help. I would do stuff. I would give guidance. I could have not shown up. By the time I left there, they could have run that command. Like the guy that came in to relieve me, he could have not shown up, and that command would have run perfectly. And that's where I started to get the whole taking more risk and pushing authority down to the enlisted guys. Because I know I get off track all the time, but one of my favorite things, I would get like some EOD enlisted guy would complain. And I have no tolerance for complainers, like for complaining at all. Like if you want to vent, just say I want to vent, and I'll just turn my brain off like I'm with my wife, right? And just go, okay, I'm not here to solve anything. But they would complain. I was like, listen, if you don't like it, then why don't you become an officer and you can go fix it? I go, because I know you're smart enough. Like there isn't one of you out there that can't get a college degree if you don't already have one, and some of you have a master's degree. I'm like, you could be an officer tomorrow and you'd be just fine. So either go be an officer or stop complaining about it, right? Because you're not going to fix it in the role that you're in right now.
Right.
Or do something or talk to somebody. But like, just stop it. It adds no value whatsoever. I go, unless you don't think you're smart enough. I'm like, oh, of course. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I think that's actually that. So I actually had Jeff O'Connor, actually. I talked to him.
Love him. He was on that Discovery Channel special.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this former Chicago police guy. I mean, like, he's just like larger than life guy. He came in and did this thing. I was like, oh my God, if he doesn't kick the crap out of him. What a great dude. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
No, he's such a good dude. When I was in nukes at the training unit under him, I'm always trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, right? Mm-hmm. I'm always trying to figure out 2, 3, 5, 10 years ahead. That way everything's going to change, and I know that, but at least I have a goal that I can go towards. And so it's like, hey, can I talk to you? And asked him about, like, what do I want to do with my life? I.e., do I want to, had kind of an option to get out and do something. Do I want to stay enlisted? Do I want to go officer? And he's like, well, I can't really help you with the getting out part. You know, that's a straight you decision. But on the officer versus enlisted side, here's what I can tell you. If you want to make changes in policy and affect that stuff, go officer. If you want to make changes in individuals' lives, stay enlisted. And I think that actually is pretty true, right? Like, as the enlisted guy, and there's several people at the command now that keep emphasizing as we're arguing and bickering about X, Y, or Z, right? We can influence. We don't make the decision. Mm-hmm. We can give all our recommendation, and we need to make sure, as the enlisted guys, we need to make sure that, one, we're solid, so when we give a recommendation, there's something behind it. But that's all we can do. We can give a recommendation, give the reasons why we're giving the recommendation, but we're not the bottom line signature on really anything. There's very few programs.
Yeah, not a program, but tactically.
Yes,
absolutely,
and that's, so that's where the personnel side came in, is, right, like the decisions that I make tactically, if we go work, right, it's my job, it's on me to train my team and those people under me, right? And by virtue of that, and by how close I am to the individuals all throughout my career, and, now that it's the tail end, it starts getting a little further away, but it's still pretty close to them, as opposed to 17 years in as an officer, you're not next to that new guy very often, right? So in that perspective, and that's at the time I started, I went back and, okay, what do I want? And I really enjoy the training side of things, and not the programmatics of training. It's the physical, actual going out, setting up drills, watching drills, giving input, and then watching people. What I really enjoy, it isn't even so much that. What I enjoy is the backside of it, seeing it click for people.
Yeah.
And the way I get to do that the longest was stay enlisted, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it's important to think ahead, because I look at it as I need to, for my officers, my junior officers that come along, it's my job to train them so that they don't get to a point, right? Because it's super easy to say, oh, well, I have to train the junior guys because they're the ones who are going to go down range. Well, it could be any of us, actually. Mm-hmm. But if I make sure that I train my junior officer on the EOD things, at some point they may be in a position, and I know this because I've heard it from several commanders that, you know, they're in a position where they don't have a senior enlisted on that staff with them, and they're asked, hey, you're an EOD officer. This is your lane. What should we do? I can influence that decision, you know, 10 years before that decision is ever going to potentially be made. I'm not the one bottom line in anything,
Right.
but I don't know. I think it's interesting. You're 100% right. And, you know, if you want to, if you're going to complain about that program and you've given all the input you can and nothing's changed, the only thing left to do is to go officer.
Right. Yeah.
Not everybody wants to do that.
Yeah.
So stop complaining.
Well, it's very much like I read the Daily Stoic like every day, and it's, you know, like either there's a problem that if you're going to put energy to it and to try and fix it, then it's worthwhile to engage. If it's not, then you should
Right.
move on and ignore. Like there's no point.
Yeah.
To it. And it
That
takes
makes
a long
sense.
time to get there, right?
Yeah. After, so let's see, you were 68, and then where'd you roll after 68?
So 68, yeah, was near the end. That was I went from there to be the mock director at NECC, and then retired out of there.
That's right, because we weren't talking about you being 68. We were talking about you being tasked by 68 to move out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, actually, as Commodore, how does that change? Like, I feel like that's a small step.
It is. So, because you hear your whole life from every person I ever talked to in my entire career, from 05 up to 010, like the best thing you'll ever have in your entire career is your 05 command. And at the training unit, it was amazing. Like we won Alpha P Sloan Award. We won Best Places to Work in Virginia. We had like an unbelievably high morale. We did, you know, we got the OP5 change for making sure you could do the water bottles there. We actually got permission from the Explosive Safety Board to mix and detonate homemade explosives.
Nice.
They never moved out on it, but we actually went through and did that. We implemented the full week training plan for the full 12 weeks, made it so difficult that guys were like coming back and going, oh, this was, you know, way harder than the real thing. Mm-hmm. And 30 months I was in command, and the team that we had there, we did not have, and this is during some pretty tough times, 09 to 12. Not one person that went through our training was killed in action. Even like after I tracked it after the thing and everything.
Yeah.
From one of these things. It was the greatest accomplishment of my life, right? Hands up, there's no greater accomplishment in my life than leading the team that made the training so difficult that I think it saved people's lives, right? And that was all on guys like, you know, Jody Carpenter and Senior Chief Ryan Burton, that they just figured out how to make that stuff better. But being a Commodore is a world of difference. It's like being a mini admiral. Like you start to get some authorities that you have as a flag officer. And I guess in the old days, it used to technically be like an admiral, like the Commodore. That was like sort of a thing, like way long ago. I remember being there and going, we have 15 task groups underneath me. And I'm like, that span of control is unmanageable. I'm going to shrink it down. Like I'm going to combine these task groups and do this. And it's like, can I really do that? Like, so as an 05, you could put together packages of people that go out, but you're out there and you're writing like the organization that's going to execute the missions out there.
Yeah.
You're sending people in and out of countries, and you don't have to check with anyone else. Like you're bottom lining the thing.
Yeah.
Like it is more authority than you'll ever have in your life. And I know there's a generation of guys that were like, I don't want to be a Commodore. It's this and it's that and blah, blah, blah. Like, hey man, you're missing out. That by far was the absolute best thing I ever got to do. But I mean, Admiral Cottle, the current Fleet Forces commander, was the 1-star, the Deputy 6th Fleet Commander, and then the 6th Fleet Commander was Admiral Grady, Vice Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff right now, right? Yeah. So those were two guys. Those guys taught me more and during that time than ever I could have ever think. And so you get there and you're the Commodore and you think, okay, what am I allowed to do? And so, and I start messing around with some of this authority stuff and everything, and it's nothing like anything I'd had. And I called Admiral Cotto one day, and I said, hey, sir, I'm moving this CB detachment from here in Africa over to somewhere else. And he has this like real heavy North Carolina accent that I try and emulate whenever I can, or, try and say, I don't know how well I do it, but one of these days I'll probably get in trouble, right? So he's like, Lenny, are you asking me for permission to do something you have the authority to do? Or are you just informing me? And I'm like, the latter, he goes, good. Because don't you ever fucking ask me for permission to do something you have the authority to do. And he wasn't like yelling at me.
Yeah.
Like, he was telling me like, you damn well better understand your authority.
Right.
And you execute on that authority. Don't you dare ask anybody. And then he went on and he goes like, and you don't fucking work for me. I'm the deputy. You work for the goddamn 3-star. So you don't have to tell me shit. He goes, probably a good idea. I can give you some advice. And I mean, like I had like 3 or 4 moments like that where he just trained the shit out of me and taught me how to be a major commander. I mean, he would just come up with these things and I'm like, I never thought of it like that. But by the end of it, I'm like, I got this. I'm like, this is unbelievable what I get to do. And I'm moving this around. I'm like, hey, we're not going to do that for the O plan. I'm going to change how we approach this O plan with these forces. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. And you're like, holy crap. Like, I'm the one doing that? Like,
That worked.
Yeah. And so you just, being a major commander was the most challenging thing I ever did and the most rewarding thing I ever did in the Navy, without a doubt. And anybody that doesn't want to do it, they don't understand that part, or they're afraid to make decisions, right? So when you are at a task force, your boss is a 3-star.
Yeah.
And so you, for the first time in your life, have to be senior guy with a secret. There's things that don't warrant telling the 3-star. We've been trained since day one, like, oh, this guy got in a car wreck.
Right.
I better tell him, like, doesn't meet the level. Like, I just have that. Now, if that spins out of control, that's on me.
Yeah.
Right. But like, there was so many things that I'm like, I don't need to tell my boss that. And that was the weirdest thing, like imaginable, but it really taught you about your authority and kind of how to be a leader. And that's what they're testing you. Like, are you going to be effective as an admiral?
Yeah.
Like, that's sort of their test. Like, are you scared to use your authority? Like Admiral Cotto, like, was, getting on me and saying stuff. And you kind of rise to the occasion. You're just like, wow, this is fantastic. I remember there was a METOC debt coming in, and one of the guys called me and said, hey, Lenny, we need you to take OpCon of this METOC debt that's coming in. I'm like, okay. Are you sure? Like, yeah. I go, do they have a mission? Like, yeah, they're going to go do this port survey here. I go, oh, okay. Because if you give me OpCon of them, I'm going to stop them from doing that, and I'm going to have them go over here and work with my MCM guys, because I don't have any assets in theater to do stuff. And so we're going to run the minefield, and I'm going to have them give positives. And they're like, well, you can't tell them. I'm like, I can't if I have OpCon. And he's like, well, I go, hey, man, if you need somebody to blame if something goes wrong, just tell me that. Give me CrapCon, right? Hey, like if something gets fucked up, Lenny, it's all on you with their force protection. But you can't tell them what to do at all. I'm like, okay, I understand. I have CrapCon. I'll take that. But don't tell me it's OpCon.
Right.
It's not, right? And so you start to understand kind of those true authorities and what you're doing. And it was challenging, but unbelievably rewarding. I would, anybody that has an opportunity, especially at the task force level, to be a major commander, it's greatest by far. I mean, nothing even came close.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, part of that's being in Rhoda, but it's, yeah.
How exhausting was it though to do that? Like mentally, I'm sure a lot came in.
It was by far the hardest thing I'd ever done, because we had guys spread out throughout Africa, and there was stuff because they were all out with they were supporting special forces.
Yeah.
So you have very little authority to tell them where to go, what to do, how to report in, if they can even get comms. And soft guys, they loved them, right? I mean, our CBs and EOD guys and stuff that were out there with them, killing it, right? But you had to worry, like, are they going to jump up on the turret? Are they going to try to? And so once the 4-star found out, like, how many forces he had down in Africa, and, like, the guys are like, what do you mean there's all those guys? I'm like, well, and so I remember sending them something. I said, hey, sir, there was an IED event in this country or whatever. And pull them out. It's like 25 miles away from where they were. Get them out of there. So we just got word from the ambassador that he really doesn't think it's a threat personally. And he said he wants them there because this is one chance to do an exercise with some of that. And they don't have any other military forces that have come there. So he, like ambassador himself, really wants them to stay there. And like I said, why don't we just give it till tomorrow? And we did it. And that happened like 3 times in a row. And it was like, get them out of there. I'm like, so you got to understand, they're on some faraway fob in some awful country. And the only way to get them out of there is with the soft guys' air assets, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, these guys are keeping the generators on for their fob. I'm like, I guarantee that plane will break. Like, they're not going to let these guys leave, right? Exactly. And he's like, well, I'm like, I know you are, sir. And I respect you tremendously. But I got to tell you, there's no way they're going to let those guys leave because there was an IED event 5 miles away from where they were.
Yeah.
I go, and we got into a few, like, but I just had to take it. Like, sir, I'm telling you, we cannot pull them out of there.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, but I'm like, okay. but it was really, it was neat because the chain of command was not set up properly.
Yeah.
And who should have had it, the soft guys probably should have had OpCon of them, but they didn't. They just had take on.
Yeah.
So we technically had OpCon, so we could have pulled them out of there, but then the only way to pull them out of there was using their, so it was like, and so we tried to, they're like, we don't want OpCon. I'm like, oh. But then we could pull them out. You're not pulling them out of here. Right? So the soft guys are arguing with me, and then the fleet guys are arguing with me. And it kind of, it ended up as kind of a cool point at, the CNO came out, Admiral Richardson. And I got him to brief him on like this, here's a map of Africa and here's everybody you have down there that's in the Navy. And he's just like, even he's kind of like, only, it's like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, that's the last time there was a site visit by leadership. It's like, what's that one? I'm like, that's the weapons they're allowed to have sometimes. They're allowed to have them, sometimes they're not. That's the last time they did an emergency drill to simulate fire coming in. Like the data, like we have all these little stop-go charts. That's how long they've been. That's the new guy in charge. And he's like, is that right? EO1? Like, yeah, EO1's our senior guy down there. It's like, well, what? I'm like, sir, he's been trained. He did the thing. Like, third deployment, understands it. Like, and you can see, like, these are fleet guys. Like, oh,
freaking out.
They're freaking out a little bit. I'm like, they got it. Like, we've done everything we possibly can to put these guys in the safest possible place. And he's like, okay, I got it. Like it makes sense. And but even CNO is like, ooh, that's
That's something that there's a question that comes out as you're talking about that, and as you're talking about how an incident happens that's nowhere near our people. And in my mind, as I'm thinking about that, right, and I'll say that I won't call it more risk, but I, as a tactically and operationally minded person, I'm looking at as an IED event gets closer and I'm with people, that makes me want to stay with them more because I'm the person that is there to protect them for that.
Yeah.
I know that as we get higher, sometimes the look is, well, I don't want somebody hurt that I'm responsible for on my watch. Mm-hmm. How often did it seem like, and you don't have to answer this, but how often did it seem like it was just, it made operational sense to try and pull people, vice the ask was, I just really don't want that while it's on my watch.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that. And of course, I'm the idiot that just kept pushing it. So it was when we would get one of those, and it was always like, well, what does the ambassador think? Or what does the country team think? And they're like, we're not worried about this. Like, okay, then I'm not worried about it.
Yeah.
How am I going to second guess you? Like, I mean, either I trust the ambassador and his staff or I don't. They own the country. Right. Anyway, so like, I'm not going to, now if they were like, hey, this is, we'd be like, sure. I don't care if you're supposed to, like, you have the best threat assessment possible on the ground of what can happen. So I never worried about it in that regard. We always had great intel back from the guys that were there. I saw it interesting. You brought the point up, and it reminded me of a story. So when we would do the FTXs at the training unit, we would always throw in, I was talking to you about this before, we'd throw in an air vent.
Yep.
And the guys are like, why are we doing an air vent? These guys, they're going to Iraq. They're not going to do fast roping. I'm like, I know, but I want to ramp up the training. And so they're going to fly out to Fort Pickett. They're going to fast rope in because I just want them to think about being mobile and doing the thing. And, this wasn't just me. It was like, this was the main work group, the senior chiefs, the thing, they came up with the FTX guys. So they went out and there was a team doing it. There was a senior chief in charge of the team. He was a HRS team master. He put everybody down, and it was his turn to go down, and he didn't lower his third line gear. And they had an opportunity to lower third line gear and just leave first and second line gear on and go down. So he kept his third line gear on, went to get on the rope, and he's been out of shape, right? And started to go down and let go of the rope, right? Because the helicopter's going, rope's getting, fell, broke his leg, right? And they're deploying and, not. So the first thing was my master chief at the time, runs to, I'm like, oh, where are you going? He's like, well, I'm going to go find him. I'm like, don't do that. I go, they have a whole plan. They have a medical plan. They briefed everything. I'm like, the last thing they need is the CO and the CMC going, like, what good are we going to do? I said, I trust those guys. Like, do you trust those guys? Who's in charge of the, and they tell me, I'm like, I trust that guy.
Yeah.
Let them do their job. When they're ready, they know that we're here.
Yeah.
They're going to come over here and tell me, like, we don't need to go over there and do. So I go, I appreciate it. I know, like, that's your instinct. Like that's, we had no value right now. So they get through the thing and everything. So I called the Commodore and said, hey, sir, this guy broke his leg. And then he's like, Lenny, I mean, they're getting ready to deploy. Now we got to have to replace them. And you're like, I don't know about this. You throwing this air off stuff on everything. And are we pushing too hard? I'm like, I said, hey, sir, I want to get him ready for deployment. Right. Fair enough. But I go, the guy let go of the rope. And he's like, yeah, but I'm like, no, sir. I think you just missed the point that I just made. I go, if you can show me any brief where they don't tell you, like, don't let go of the rope when you're fresh with it. Right. It doesn't matter. Your gloves come off, doesn't matter. Don't let go of the rope. Don't ever let go of the rope. Right. Yeah. I go, if we had briefed something wrong, if the guys were, I go, everything was done perfectly. He decided to let go of the rope because he made a mistake. And I go, and it sucks, but I don't think we should stand down the training and make it watered down because a guy made a mistake that we all know is wrong.
Right.
I go, if you can find me one person to look me in the face and tell me that was it was okay to let go of the rope.
Right.
Yeah. I go, that's 101, right? Yeah. I go, even I know that as an 1140, not to let go of the rope, right? So, he let it go by. And then whoever was in charge of the scene there, who was running the drills, came up and he said, hey, sir, we waved the helicopter off because they were supposed to put the other team on. And then because we switched out, we had two teams in FTX and fly them back to do an assault and in the village in the middle of there. And I'm like, okay, why did you do that? I go, you're in charge of the scene. Like, I'm not second guessing. I'm just asking, what was your thought process, right? And, by this time I could ask something like that and they didn't think, oh, he's being a jackass. Like, I mean, I would always ask him, like, why did you come to that conclusion? He's like, well, that guy got hurt. I'm like, okay, why did he get hurt? Well, let go of the rope. I'm like, did you brief him not? He's like, yeah. I go, okay, so was your brief good? Yeah. Was your plan good? Like, it was everything. How did the medical response go? It was perfect. It was here in less than 5 minutes. Had him stabilized, everything. Like, I go, why'd you wave off the helicopter? He's like, well, I go, just because somebody got hurt. I go, you didn't make any mistakes. That guy made the mistake. And so what you did is then you took away this training segment from the next guys. Like, did the helicopter, like, if that was a bad pilot, like, I get it. Like, but none of those things, I go, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. What I'm trying to tell you is don't just take that single thing and then just go, oh, that's it. We need to stop training.
Yeah.
Right. Because we have to keep training hard, like, the whole time. Don't take too much risk, but you got to take some risk. Mm-hmm. And he stopped and he thought about it. He's like, hey, you're right. I shouldn't have called the thing off. I'm like, hey, you made the call at the time with what you knew. I'm not going to second guess you. I go, I just want you to think about it.
Yeah.
And another one of those guys that made Master Chief. And I mean, there's just, wonderful people, but I always try to kind of give them some of that. Like, don't let that thing throw you off just because something went wrong.
Right.
Right. Look internally. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes people, what they don't think about is, yes, some negative things can happen. Somebody can forget to hold a rope and break a leg, right? And it's not a catastrophic event either, right? It's not something that, yep, okay, training's done for the day because we had a major event.
Yeah.
But on the positive side, I'll give an example. On a deployment I was on, we had our hearse master. They're flying from, the carrier off to a destroyer to go do a drill. And I didn't even hear about it. Well, I heard about it from my guys, but I didn't hear the full thing until the aircrew guy told me. And I went down to the chief's mess and we always kind of sat together, and he came up and he was like, dude, your guy was fucking awesome. And I was like, oh, okay. And I guess like what had happened is one of the guys was going out, and slowly as the doors open, the crew chief's comms cable started sneaking towards where all the guys were moving. And he turned and it wrapped up the comms cable underneath his kit. And my hearse master, just without even thinking about it, saw it get snagged, saw him start to go down the rope. It start to get tight, took out his J-knife, slashed the thing. And the dude kind of like did this a little bit of a pause and then just went down. And I was like, I thought the air crew, who was the crew chief, I thought he was going to be like, I need my effing cable, And I was like, oh, I'm sorry about that. And he's like, no, man, that's awesome. Here, I got the cable for you. So he like cut part of the cable off on the other side and gave it to me. So he's like, you can give it to your dude. Yeah. But like, yeah, there's some negative things that could happen, but the positive things are, that's just one more rep of confidence, And in those situations where all, like you're talking about, all the med went well, everybody else went down, everything was enacted correctly. Now everybody can look at the positive side. Okay, all that stuff that we put in place for this incident happened correctly. Everything works like it should, so long as everybody holds their rope.
Yeah, right. It's it, You're like, oh, the rope. Like, yeah, that's bad, right? Yeah. Even I know that one.
Right. Speaking of incidents, you had mentioned something about a diving near incident.
Oh yeah,
it makes me curious.
Yeah. So this is when just like when I don't have a lot of jumps, but when one of them kind of went a little like it shouldn't, like I was getting off the drop zone and went and so on that one I was like, oh, I'm kind of glad I went through Benning and learned how to fall a whole bunch of times, right? The other guy's like, oh, so with this. I looked on it and said, oh, I'm really glad that it was really hard in dive school.
Yeah.
It helped me through this. So we were getting ready to go deploy on the carrier. We were going to do an MCI exercise at the very end. And then things were still kind of a little bit in the Gulf. This was in 98, 99. Like, I didn't think anything was going to happen, but we wanted to keep diving and sort of stay sharp. So there's a quarry out in Virginia. I don't know if anybody uses it anymore. And back then you could do explosives in it. And once I was like 60 feet deep, and the other side was like 220 feet deep. And I mean, it's the size of an Olympic swimming pool. And you can get 220 feet. Wow. It's not that you went down that far, but so we did 150 foot Mark 16 dives, 5 minutes. That was the plan. No D. So put the line down. And this is back in the old days where you had the barrel valves and there was nothing attached to your BC.
Okay.
So there was no way to inflate your BC. It was just sort of like, I mean, you could pull the thing, but that was about it.
Yeah.
So we go down and they said, all right, 5 minutes, go down, watch your thing, 145 feet, stop, stay down there, at 4 something, give us line pulls, come back up. So we go down, and I think we're going down a little bit slower than we thought, and, taking some time. And so we're going, and then at like 120 feet, lights are out, can't see anything. And so we're going down, and like we both had our hands on it, and his hand was below mine, and I was the primary diver, and he was buddy lined into me. And so I feel his hand stop, so I stop, and right when we hit, I go to like just sort of come up like this, and I guess he was reaching for the primary line to give line pole signals. So maybe he was the primary diver and I was on the buddy line. Yeah. It was a while ago. And so he starts giving the line pole signals. He's got 3-finger gloves on, but he didn't realize that he had grabbed my primary display.
Oh no.
So he was right. So like we go down and he wasn't the best diver on the team. He was amazing at land stuff.
Yeah.
He's one of the best you ever seen, but still a really good diver, but not as good as, like everybody has their strengths and weaknesses.
Yep.
And he's just, but I have no idea. It's pitch black. So I'm holding on and there's no way to do things. And he ripped my mask off. Coming out. And so the water, and I'm like, so I'm holding on to the thing because I'm super negative. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to fall down to 220 feet. And like, what is going on? I'm holding this thing on. And then I got a bunch of the water in it. I'm like, oh crap, I don't want to spit it back out and get a caustic cocktail because it's a closed loop. And I was like, and the whole time, like, you can't go up. You can't go up. You can't go up. Relax. You can still breathe. You're fine. So it stops. So I managed to pry his hand off of mine while I'm still holding on to the line. So we go up and I'm looking and I'm thinking, oh my God, he's like, something's wrong. Or I'm expecting to see like the eyes, like enormous in the thing. And he just seems kind of fine. And I look at him and, first I want to like kill him.
Yeah.
And I look and I'm like, and there's the primary line down and back up. And so I go over to him and I'm like, to reach the thing. And I give the line pole signal. So it was like right at 4 minutes and something. Like by the time we got through all this, I get it. And they're like, man, they're right on schedule. Like everybody on the service is like, oh, these guys are good. So I get up to the top and I go off gas. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? And so then they look and everything is broken off my mask and thing. And that's when we realized, oh, it wasn't you were trying to kill me.
Yeah.
It was you're trying to get the line pole signals, but you just reached and you found the first thing that was about that size and you're yanking down the thing. Oh man. But that was one of those, again, building confidence, nothing went wrong. That's the reason they kick the crap out of you in dive school. I'm sure guys have had, a million things like that, but
that's crazy.
Yeah, I thought, and we were at odds sometimes, me and him.
Yeah.
We didn't always see eye to eye. And I'm thinking, oh man, he's going to try and kill me.
Right.
I didn't think I was that bad.
Didn't do anything to deserve this.
Yeah, death is a little.
Oh, that'd be intense. A little bit scary.
Yeah, I was glad that I was a much better diver back then.
Yeah.
Thing. I dove as much as I possibly could. I was always the first guy. Like, hey, I'll go. I'll do it. Because I felt more comfortable. Like I got the MCM stuff. I really enjoyed diving. I used to dive on my own and thing, and so I was just super comfortable in the water. So I dove as much as I can, and thank God I did. Because if I was one of those guys not as comfortable, that could have gone pretty badly.
Yeah. Absolutely. Ooh. Diving incidents. I think I would prefer to have a parachuting incident vice a diving incident. I know this is a weird rabbit hole to go down, but just being under the water and I don't know. There's, I know most of our incidents come out okay, but it just sucks being under the water where you're like, man, this little tube, no matter what rig you have, this little tube is what keeps me alive. Like I need to protect that plus solve whatever problem you have. Ugh.
Yeah. I when I was the CO of the training unit, I did the death investigation. We had a guy that died on a training exercise. It was during Bold Alligator or something like that. There's 3 like deaths out there, and he went down and it was like a single tended diver, perfect flat seas, right? 105 feet, something like that. Nothing crazy, and by the time they figured it out and got him back up, and like 3 hours trying to resuscitate, thought they felt a pulse, got him back to the chamber, and ended up passing away at Camp Lejeune.
Yeah.
So I got the call. I went down there with Sal Dentu. I think he still works at the group. Sal was kind of like they were nice enough to send somebody that knew what the hell they were talking about with the Mark 16, where it's like,
Yeah.
So we go down there to do the investigation, and you could see they're just, they've been up all day. They've done the thing. And so I sat down with every one of these guys and I'm like, how's it going? And, first of all, they hate me, right? Because
Right.
Here's, CO, whatever, that came down here to do the investigation and tell me why I was wrong, that wasn't here, that doesn't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I just talked to him like, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? How are the guys doing? And so, we could talk for a little while. And I remember talking to like the chief, and you could see he was shaken up on one of the platoons. There was 3 of them down there. And I said, as a leader, if I was in your shoes, this is what I would do. I'd go back and I'd take the whole platoon and I'd take them and have them see the psychiatrist. I'm like, I know you don't need it, but if you go and do it, then I'm sure some of the guys probably need it. And then the stigma's gone, and then you could see like every one of them I still remember. They're like, yes, it's a good idea, sir. Like, yeah, I don't need it. I'm like, oh, of course you don't. And I'm thinking, you just watch like this guy and tried to do but I mean, that's gonna, no matter what. And so they go through, and I talked to every single person, and I went back and checked in with the psychiatrist, and they were like, yeah, every one of them came in. I'm like, okay, good. And they're like, I can't tell you anything. And I'm like, I wouldn't expect you to, nor would I want you to disclose anything. And they said, but I'll tell you right now, there's at least 4 of them that would have had long-term PTSD if they hadn't done this, that were like there. It's like this person that's and it just kind of made me think like, oh, I'm really glad that I did that. And I say it, and I talk about it all the time. Like, if you think you need some help, man, like get some help. Like there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing there. And if you're a leader, you go and you do it. Like I've seen a therapist before. It's like I grew up in some kind of a weird situation and stuff and everything like that. Things didn't always go well. And like I went and saw a couple different ones just to talk about different things. And it was more a normalizing of like, I think I'm the only person in the world that thinks that. Like, oh, that's totally normal. It's called this, right? It is. Like, yeah, there's a name for it. Like, yeah. Oh yeah, here's a couple coping mechanisms. Just do this thing. I'm like, do I have to come back and medicine? Like, no. Like that's all you need. I'm like, that's it? Like, yeah. Oh, well, it's a lot better than I thought. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Just getting in front of that professional listener.
Yeah.
Getting somebody to do that. Yeah. I don't remember where we were going with the story, and I got off track, but it's one of those public service things that I just want to keep beating the drum. And like, if you think you got problems, just go see somebody. Like it's just not worth it to hold it in. I mean, your family, everybody, most people aren't qualified to be a professional listener.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I 100% agree. I go fairly regularly. Go, I think right now we're at once a month. And it's, I don't have anything crazy going on. I haven't seen stuff that bothers me, whatever. But for me, it's just this job over years and years and years is extremely stressful. Even if you're not going overseas consistently, just doing this job, because you're training people or you're training to potentially do that. So that's like, I was just thinking about it the other day. Everything that we do, whether you're doing a high risk thing, which obviously has the inherent risk with it, or you're just doing, an IED drill or a chem drill or whatever, not truly high risk because it's all training. There's no real stuff out there. But we, rightfully so, train everything as realistic as possible. Yeah. And when you do that, and, I know many, many, many times after I got done with the drill, I got chewed out because I would have killed somebody, or I would have died, or I would have gotten hurt or hurt somebody, right? And we do that for a reason, so that you don't take it lightly. But it turns out that builds over the years, and it just because you're in a constant state of stress, constantly think about it, and it doesn't get easier as you go up in rank. I wish it did. But yeah, 100%. I go consistently, and I'm extremely open about it because of exactly what you're saying, like trying to break that stigma. I know there's still some people out there that think that if you go, you're automatically going to get canned. Well, so far I haven't. And I'm pretty open about it, and just like you said too, I've learned probably the best thing that I learned out of going, and my wife doesn't listen to this, so I can say, I was talking about my relationship with my wife, and I swear until the psych explained something to me that should have been obvious,
Right.
but oftentimes it's not. I could have sworn that my wife did these certain things purposefully to attack me, right? And as it turns out, the way I feel calm is by having as much detail and as much planning as possible. That's what keeps me in a lower state of stress.
Control.
And it turns out she is the exact opposite, where having everything lined out to a T, time-wise, all of that stresses her out. Because in my mind, having everything lined out, that means, okay, I have something I can deviate from. In her mind, she's thinking, I have to hit every single one of these marks. And until they explained that to me, I was like, that's exactly what she is. That's exactly what I am. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Okay, she's not doing it to attack me. And of all the things that I've talked about and, whatever, that's probably helped me the most. And I feel free to share that, because one, if it helped me, it can probably help somebody else. But also, like, just like you were saying, it's not, this crazy concoction of medication to figure that out. Sometimes it's just, here, this might help. Mm-hmm. And it does. And sometimes there is medication involved that you need. But
yeah. I mean, it's so much of it. Yeah. It's just, I think the earlier you talk about it, the easier it gets. And if you don't have the opportunity or you're unwilling to do it, then it's going to be a little harder.
Yeah.
Later. Yeah. I made a long-winded story to make the point when you talked about like the diving, jumping thing. And I remember talking to one of those guys that I later, and they said, I just can't believe on a bright, sunny day with no waves and everything perfect that we lost somebody. And I'm like, can I tell you something that might piss you off? I'm like, have we gotten enough of that relation? They're like, yeah, it's fine. And we were out, somewhere I saw him and, we had a beer. And I'm like, I know us old guys are a huge pain in your ass. And we talk about MCM is different, right? I'm not trying to take anything away from the IED stuff you guys did. Like, it's amazing. I never did anything like that. Like, at all. What you guys have been able to accomplish is unbelievable. I'm like, but you don't die doing a training IED thing. Right. But you can here very, very easily. And I said, it's just different. And that's why we harp on why it's so important that we do this and be very careful and make sure that we're really good at it, because diving is just the way to get there. And I know we say that all the time, but yeah. And he's like, I guess I didn't really, I go, yeah. It wasn't a real mine. There's no weather. There's no rush. There's nothing. It's just, yeah.
Nope. I think that kind of leads into, after 68, you're getting pretty close to getting ready for retirement at that point, right?
Yeah, after 68, went on to NECC, was the mock director there, and it was it was difficult. Like, it's I've been in and out of NECC many times in my life, and I remember starting as a pretty junior guy that went there and got screamed at by people, to eventually that they didn't do that to me anymore by the time I was, there the last time. But it is, it's just a very interesting place. It feels like a lot of well-meaning people that don't seem to get as much done as the capacity and the capability that they have.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily know why, right? And I think a lot of it is they're sort of act like, NECC is just this, thing by the rest of the Navy. Nobody really understands it. So I think that's difficult, right? It's difficult to keep like pressing when people are like, oh, what do you guys do?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think we need to do better. Like, it's an incredibly important organization to us as EOD and like the whole force, but it just, sometimes it feels like there's just a lot of people that aren't trying that hard. And that comes back to the leadership.
Yeah.
And I remember going into Admiral Brackey's office, and he goes, I know you're getting out, because I had an opportunity to go be the chief operating officer of a company. And so I was getting out, and he said, but we got the DEOC survey back, and you're, you were in there by name a lot, right? And you're just the mock director. And I'm like, okay, sir. He's like, yeah, a couple comments. And he kind of read through some of the stuff, and you're being a little harsh on people and this and that. And I'm like, I got it, sir. I go, you're a really good dude, and you're really easy to work for, and you never get on anybody for anything. Like, I don't know that you ever raised your voice or gotten upset or anything with anybody. You always ask people to do stuff. You never tell them, order them, right? They understand that you're, it's an order, like it's the nice way of asking, right? And I said, there's a lot of people in this command that take advantage of that, and it makes me fucking sick to my stomach. And I said, so I tell them that, because they should be so lucky as to work for a guy that just goes, what would you like to do? Well, where should we go? What should we do? Okay, great. Give me an idea. Sure, I'm open to that. Yeah. And it wasn't that he wasn't leading. He certainly was.
Right.
But it made, and I kind of took on that role a little bit, and it pissed a lot of people off, but I was like, yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
You should not take advantage of the generosity and the kindness of this man,
right,
that is open to moving this force forward, but expects you to do something about it, right? Like, he's not going to be in your stuff, like hammering away. Mm-hmm. And that got to me.
Yeah.
And then he offered me command of EXWDC, and I said, sure, sounds great. Another command, great. That's my fourth one. And I came back the next day and said, I don't have it.
Yeah.
I got nothing left. There's no way I can go over there and do the job that I need to do. I'm burned out. I just don't have it. And I turned it down, and I said, no, you know what? I got that job opportunity. I'm going to go and do that. I'm going to get out. I'm good. And he's like, okay, sounds good.
That's awesome. I think not enough people listen to that feeling, that like, because these jobs are exhausting.
Yeah.
And, at my level, like, I'm sure it's much more as you get up there, and if you're burned out, you're not going to put what you normally give into it, which is not going to, I've seen on the enlisted side specifically, people get out of the community with mediocre reputations when at the beginning they had an amazing reputation. And sometimes that's just because they said, hey, I shouldn't do this job right now. Kind of going back to what we talked about before. Maybe I shouldn't take that senior chief job that will give me that master chief thing, or that chief job that will give me that senior chief thing, because I just need some time to recoup from all the other stuff I've done. And then moving on. And I think, and then I know too, in the community, I'm glad to hear that he said, when you said, actually, I don't want it, that it wasn't just like, oh, well, the community needs you and we need you and everybody needs you and you have to do this.
No one's ever said that to me.
Because I've, it's never the right time for someone to leave for the other person looking at them. Like, you make senior chief. Oh, well, you're not gonna stick it out and be a master chief. I mean, you did all this time. You make 05. Well, you're not gonna go 06. You're not gonna go. It should be that decision that the person weighs and moves on, and transitions. And speaking of transition, how did that process go?
So I was super excited. I couldn't believe that I was going to get out and get to go be a chief operating officer of a 1,000-person company. Like, I was like, this is fantastic. And it was a great organization, but the owner and I didn't necessarily see eye to eye.
Yeah.
And I realized that my approach wasn't working for them. And so I moved on after, about a year. And from that point, I went and did some defense contracting and stuff. And I mean, I struggled quite a bit. I would say I'm a little over what June 1st of this year was 4 years that I've been out.
Okay.
And I would say that was about when I finally hit my stride.
Yeah.
It took that long.
Wow.
Like everybody says, oh, it's, about a year or whatever. It's not.
Yeah.
And the biggest part of it was I no longer had a purpose. Right. So my purpose for 27 years, well, really 31, including, college and stuff like that, was to serve the Navy and the nation, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all that. Right. So I had a very clear purpose. And when I woke up every day and whatever I did, and there's plenty of days we hate it, but you could push yourself further and do more because you knew you were doing it for the Navy and the nation.
Yeah.
And that's gone along with your paycheck.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's three big things that you need, right? It's your passions or whatever kind of your hobbies are, your paycheck and your purpose. So these two things are gone, and people tell you, you just need to replace your paycheck and then focus on your passions. Like get out, go fishing, spend more time with your family. But they forget to tell you, what are you going to replace that sense of service with? You have to find something.
Yeah.
I wish somebody would have told me that. Like, it's great that you went and got the job you wanted and thing like that, but man, if you don't find something to replace that, you're going to be miserable. And it wasn't that I, miserable along the way, but I struggled as I went through and doing stuff. And that'd be the biggest piece of advice I could give to everybody is you have to have something that will be your new purpose. And people give, guys a hard time sometimes, like, oh, you're just going to go right be a contractor, do the same job. Like, yeah, because they still want to help, right? They still get to be kind of part of that purpose. And that's great. Like at first I would have been like, I never would have done that.
Yeah.
But then I look back now and I go, that's great. If that's what you want to do, that helps you stay connected to the people and still help and be part of the piece. Then you can maintain sort of the same purpose, right? But if you're going to just like get away from that and go, man, I hate the military, it's stupid, and they like, you better be ready to have something else. And some people are very fortunate. Like I use like OC is the best example, right?
Yeah.
Like he went and he found his purpose, right?
Yeah.
It's the woodworking. It's the continuing to be engaged with the veteran community. Like, I mean, it's just like, he's like the quintessential one of you just go, hey, you're going to leave, you're going to do that, and you're going to be amazing at it.
Yeah.
Like that's exactly. But most of the rest of us don't have anything that tangible that we go and do right away.
Yeah.
Like you have, like, if this becomes your thing, you got it. Like you got it already. But other people think you go make money and do that. Like that's not going to do it.
Right.
You're going to hit a point. You're just going to go, this is dumb. Or you're going to be working for somebody making a bunch of money and they're going to go, oh, we didn't do this. And you're like, what? Man, that's not good for the people that work for me.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're going to go back to that thing. You're like, well, I'm not going to, for just profits, I'm not going to screw all these people and everything. Like, I'll screw them for the Constitution, but I won't do it for profits. And you have this sort of crisis of conscience because you're just trying to survive after you leave. You're like, oh, I made a job and I did this and everything. If you don't find that purpose, it's hard. Yeah. So it's cool that there's, like the Commit Foundation, Honor Foundation, stuff like that. I think they help you a lot with that. I didn't go through either one of them, but I've talked to people that have. And it's anything you can do to find your purpose, your next purpose, right. In life, because you gotta, hopefully you got a lot of time left after that to do it. So, yeah, I messed that one up quite a bit, and I think I'm finally there.
Yeah,
we talked about it before. Like, you got to figure out how to serve again, and whether that's your church or whatever, and you just even the stuff you don't have time to do,
right?
You just do it.
Yep.
Right, and good things will happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I know you've started at least one business. Did that help? Like I should say, not did that help, but did your business come from wanting to find a purpose, another way you can serve too?
Yeah, I think the first one was I wanted to help people be successful, right, in their business. I've always enjoyed kind of helping people solve problems, right? And I thought that was kind of the purpose I was going after, was just the excitement of solving a problem, a challenging thing. So I started, and that one's going pretty well. And I brought in some other people with me, and I like it, and I want to continue to do that one. But then I just started another business, which is interesting because I've been doing renovations for 20, 30 years, just kind of, oh man, cramp.
Yeah.
Like,
I've been there.
Yeah. So, but I've been doing the renovations for 30 years, and I've had buildings and stuff and everything like that. And so I just started a construction company again, and now I'm helping some people do these projects. And I realized, like, I've always enjoyed doing this. I'm going to do it. And then it's finally the one that's shown me, I think, where I want to go with a nonprofit, which I'm really tired of hearing about sort of the affordable housing piece, when it's like everybody's trying to kind of help and do stuff. And you just need to build houses, right?
Yeah.
Like you just got to make housing for people. Like, you can't be homeless if you have a house,
Right?
So I mean, it's not a like super hard problem to solve. So how do you take all of these resources that are out there that are trying to fix this problem and start to maximize the efficiency of them, so you can get as many things? Well, I mean, I'll do that by having a construction company, building enough money, and then I can start to figure out, how do I do that with, smaller community homes, things, whatever those are, veterans. I mean, there's a ton of ability there. And so that kind of brings together my problem solving desire, which is there, but it's not my purpose, but it's still like the thing that drives me.
Right.
Like we talked about at the beginning too. How do you keep EOD guys interested? By challenging them.
Yep.
Making them solve problems, right? And, it doesn't have to necessarily be war. It could be something else. And like you said, hey, they respond well to that. And then the other one is, I've always been pretty good at figuring out how to build housing and do it very efficiently. And I mean, like, I bid a job the other day, and I'm like, I think I'm gonna make a pretty decent amount of money on this. I'm really, marked it up a decent amount.
Yeah.
I asked them, they're like, oh man, you're like $15,000 under the best bid I got. I'm like, oh, well, I guess I am pretty decent.
Win-win.
Yeah. So I think I can turn that into making housing better, more affordable, more accessible for people. But at least that's kind of the latest thing that I'm thinking. But
Nice.
I'm not sure exactly what the purpose is, but I think I'm getting closer.
Yeah.
I just keep trying to help.
Yeah.
And just keep trying to serve. And it feels right and it feels good. And or maybe it's just been enough time and I've forgotten enough about the Navy. Yeah.
That could always be too. Yeah. Something that I thought was interesting, and I have to try and remember exactly how it was, but it was, I saw a podcast that you did about your the business where you try and help like smaller companies is really your focus, right? Smaller companies kind of streamline and focus their energy so that they can then grow and expand or become more profitable or whatever it is that their goal is. And one of the things that was really interesting that I heard in that podcast was you talking about you sitting down with the CEO of the company and talking to them about what do you not like to do? Right. And when you were talking about that, if you want to explain that, I wouldn't mind listening. Yeah.
So what the biggest thing we do, so we try and draw an organizational chart, which sometimes seems like, wow, where does this concept come from? Like, we take it for granted, like who works for who, right? So you put them in all the different boxes and you find very quickly that a small business owner is in typically like 15 of the 20 boxes. So then you go through and go, what do you not like to do? What are you not good at? And what could be replaced for inexpensive, sort of high ROI return on there. And those three things that come together, that's the first hire that we do. And so you just ask them, like, and this goes back to a conversation we had before about strengths. Like, what are your strengths? What are you really good at? Most owners of small businesses, they start because they're really good at a service or an operation or whatever that is. And they don't know, but they are. They're the best salesperson.
Yeah.
Because they can sell this thing that they're passionate about. What they're not good at is marketing, right? I mean, some of them are, but by and large, they're not good at finance, IT, accounting, HR, operations, like, project management, SOPs, right? Like all that kind of stuff. So we just try and fill in the rest of that and go, if you had an ideal organization, it's sales and operations there, then what would we add to this? Okay, you're doing those things today. All right, I think this is the first one. And we have somebody that can do that for this much an hour. Do you want to try that out for a couple hours a week? And so for a few $100s, they can give that a try and go, wow, that was helpful. Like, okay, good. Did it help you make more money? Sometimes they're like, I don't care. It just saved me time. Like, and my time is way more valuable than that. Like, okay, good. And other times it's like, oh, well, we can help you outsource something or do those kind of things. And it gets them into sort of a bigger company habit. So when it's just you and your wife and your nephew, right, it's kind of like, oh, we're running this small business. I try and get them to think, what should your business look like if you grow to the level that you want?
Right.
And to do that, we have to get you over the barrier of you need to hire people.
Yeah.
And now you might need to, I'm not saying full-time employee. And then you get into well, then how am I going to control if they're like, well, you have to kind of give that up. Like that was something of my generation that people are like, I don't want a part-time employee. I want to I have nothing but part-time employees in my company. I think we have like 15 of them.
Really?
Yeah. It's me and my business partner, and everybody else is part-time. And
Gotcha.
We've never missed anything because they didn't do their job. So you realize the younger generation now, their reputation is their work profile. If they're a freelancer, I mean, if you get one bad review, that's it. So people think, oh, they won't. Like, no, they will. They have to, otherwise no one will hire them again.
Right.
Like they get yelped, right? Like it's, yeah, you put the thing in and if you get a couple of 1-stars, like nobody is going to ever hire you again.
Right.
So I haven't had any problem with, if you're honest with people and just ask them, they come in and do it. And people are shocked. Like, how do you have somebody this quality? Like, we pay them a fair amount of money and tell them that, they'll have an opportunity based on the hours that they work to share in any profits that we make at the end of the year.
Yeah. That's awesome. Where did that business and that idea kind of come from?
So I got on Upwork and just put myself out there as like a fractional chief operating officer. Got a couple clients here and there and I was helping them. And I realized I got into the point where I could give advice, but I didn't understand all of the software systems, right? Like they would be in Asana and ClickUps and Monday.com. And they're like, do you know how to run projects in there? I'm thinking, no. So I had a guy that I used to work with that is like, understands all that stuff. He's like tremendous background. His name's JC. He used to be a Crippy enlisted guy. He speaks fluent French, Russian.
Wow.
Right. Then he did some time with the 3-letter agencies. Then he started his own company as a travel business, like travel planning for safety and security. Then he was an instructional designer by trade. It's like he's like touched every program imaginable. So I called him up one day and said, hey, like we used to work together. Do you want to jump in on this? He's like, yeah, love to. So we started the business and now we've hired a bunch of specialized people that can help us with anything that we need, whether it's video editor or a graphic designer or somebody to do Facebook ads. Like we have all these different kinds of people and it's just like I can just talk to people and they go, well, can you? I'm like, sure. Can you? I'm like, sure, we can do that too. Like, I mean, half the time I don't even know. Yeah. But I know that JC knows somebody that can do it. Yeah. So like, and every time it's like, oh yeah, no, I work with a couple guys. Like he knows like one of everybody. Yeah. Yeah. You might call him Noah's Ark, right? He knows 2 of each thing. They come to him. So
that's awesome. Do you think that either your time just in the Navy in general or the things you did in EOD helped with kind of building and the way you help businesses move forward?
Any person that was in the military largely could do what I do. It is, I mean, out in the real world, especially small businesses, they're just trying to do stuff and you just go, well, do you have a checklist for that? And they're like, what? Yeah. Or where's your organizational chart? Or, where's your vision? Like what's the big picture? What are our goals? Like what are we trying to get accomplished? What's the sort of the seminal document? And you'd be able to walk into any one of these places just like me, virtually walk in and just go, do you have this? Do you have that? Oh, I can write that. Oh, I can write that. I can help you with that. And they're just like, where'd you come up with this? And like, well, we're working on this. They'll be like, what's the priority? Which one do we have to do today? Like, what has to be done today? But we're like, no, they can't all be done today. Right. Like, which one is it? Like, we only have so much time. And I'm like, well, how'd you get so smart? Like, I get this beaten into my head.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I bristled with a couple clients that are just like, oh, wow, how did you were in the military, so how did you get any experience to know how to do this? I'm like, well, I mean, I did a little bit of stuff while, there, like we managed a couple complex things, like, yeah. So it's not that I had, the big difference is it's not like you have, profit and loss responsibility, like somebody, that's in the C-suite there. I was fortunate to get an MBA, so I understood enough of that piece. So when I went into the real world, I understand that, and it wasn't hard for me to figure that out. That's probably the only kind of thing that guys and gals getting out of the military could use some coaching, mentoring, tutoring on is how do you read financial statements? How do you put that together? You've had to do that with readiness, right?
Right.
You had to generate readiness, but it's not the same thing. You're using resources to get the most you possibly can. I kind of say profit in the real world is like readiness in the Navy. It's not a great comparison, but it kind of gives you like you're trying to produce as much readiness as possible with your team.
Yeah.
Here you're trying to produce as much profit as possible, right? Same kind of approach. Definitely some language barrier, but the rest of it, it's just leading and managing people. It's stuff you've been doing your whole time. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Well, I think, as we kind of look at closing out, given a bunch of good stuff. So
send it to me. I don't remember anything interesting at all.
Is there anything that you would like to leave or like say to either the EOD force or just the people listening?
Yeah. The biggest thing I think to the EOD force is kind of twofold on that. And one is to the junior guys and gals in the force is appreciate what a great community you're part of. Don't look at it as I don't get to do this and they're not entertaining me and this deployment sucks and the thing it's like I got it. But these are the best people I'll ever work with in your life. Hands down. Like it's not even close. Like I work with some good people now. It's not the same. It's just not the same, right? You will never work with this quality of person again, right? There's a few guys and gals out there that are like super genius smart that they probably will go on and build a team, but by and large, like it's so just enjoy it, appreciate it. Like don't look for the bad. Not this thing sucks and why do we have to try and be positive, and there's almost always something good you can find out of it. Stop expecting to have people above you always lead you and do the right thing. See if you can lead your boss, right? Yeah. Take on challenges, raise your hand up, say, I'm going to do this. Tell on yourself, set a goal out loud so that you have to do it instead of just going, that wasn't right. They shouldn't have done this. And this is BS. And like that, that's not helpful to anybody. And if everybody did that when they were younger, and brought that energy to it, even when you're not being led, even when you have a bad person in charge, you're like, I got it. Nobody cares. It's about your brothers and sisters. Are you going to take care of them? Or are you going to allow a bad leader or a bad situation to let you drop your guard and then maybe get one of them killed? All right. The quintessential moment of that for me was I was at the training unit. My first speech, I'm standing up as the CO. And I said, hey, open questions. What do we got going on? And so people raised their hand like, hey, sir, people show up all the time and they don't have the gear, because they're not getting issued. And, we have to let them borrow our gear and stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, just let's make sure we have a checklist, for them to come over or, that we validate. Like we do that. I'm like, okay, well, if you get it up to my level, I can push it back to we've done that. Everybody telling me I'm trying to kind of figure out how can we help the process while I'm brainstorming in front of the crowd, which is probably not very smart. and so I kept going down the road well, we need to make sure that these guys and gals get trained. And it seemed like a bit of an us versus them thing. And it kept kind of going. And finally I just got tired of it. I'm like, show of hands right here. Who's okay that if a team shows up without their gear, we don't give it to them and they go to combat and they die? Who's okay? Show of hands. Anyone? I'm like, we will continue to give people whatever fucking gear they need, right, to make sure they get the best possible training because they're going out there on deployment and fighting real IEDs. And you can kind of see everybody's sort of like, I'm not saying you guys have to carry them I'm like, I will work as hard as I can to get them to the point where they are doing the right things, everything. But let's get out of that mindset. Yeah. Right? And it was the same one that the COs were doing. You need to make those guys work harder. They're your guys. You just send them here, right? So that would be on sort of the more junior side. And on the senior side, you owe more. Work fucking harder. Like, don't be a prima donna. Don't think like, well, these guys, like, too bad. You're the guy in charge. Fix it. Lead. Everything is hard. Doesn't matter. Try harder. You are in charge of the greatest people in the Navy. How dare you not give them your best? How dare you? Right? No excuses, not one, right? It's way more is expected. If you are going to put on that and you want to be the CO, it's not about you having a big party and this and that and look at my thing and I get to be the CO and take briefs. Like, that's all bullshit. Like, it's about leading and getting the best you possibly can out of your people, growing your people for the next one. It's not about you, not at all. And I think too many people get caught up in that about, well, what am I going to get out of this? What, like, shut your fucking mouth. Yeah. You're serving the Navy and the nation, and stop it. Yeah. Right? You owe better than that. And like, unless you want, like, I'll take anybody that disagrees with me that's in a leadership role. Why don't you go ahead and record something and tell your people that, you deserve this or that. Go ahead. Yeah. I dare you. Right? Right. Yeah. Yeah. So try fucking harder. Right. Yeah. Because there's no excuse. Like, these are the greatest people in the Navy. You have a privilege of leading them. How dare you not try as hard as you possibly can. Right. And we all fall short. And I've done it many times. But I've been a prick, and I kept going, and I kept pushing, and I kept right. And if things weren't right, I kept, and I risked my career, because that's what you're there to do. You're not there to make the next rank. You're not there to become an admiral. You're there to do the best possible thing you can for your people at the time. And if it means costing your career, then too bad. Yeah, I don't know how else to say it.
I like it. Yeah, I think that says it all.
Okay.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you come sitting down. I really enjoyed sitting down and talking with you.
Yeah. I guess you have to say that, otherwise no one else will come.
No, I mean, if I didn't, I wouldn't say it.
But looks like we're wrapping up. We're 5 minutes in. Like, ooh, just wrap it up.
It's just the intro and then directly the outro.
There goes the music. Like, yeah. Is this the Oscars? I get played off the stage.
Thank you for listening to the Echo Oscar Delta podcast, where we talk to Navy EOD techs and hear the stories that they want to share.